The funeral reception was still going on downstairs when David told me. I was in our bedroom, taking off the black dress that had made me sweat through the entire service for his father. My feet ached from those heels I'd worn to look respectful, to honor the man who'd treated me like a daughter for 15 years. Richard Parker Sr. had been more of a parent to me than my own mama, who'd passed when I was 19. He'd walked me down the aisle when David and I got married. He'd held my hand in the hospital when Deshaun was born, crying happy tears right alongside me. And now he was gone. I heard David's footsteps on the stairs, heavy and quick. When he burst through the bedroom door, I expected to see grief on his face. Maybe we'd hold each other and cry together like we used to do when things got hard. Maybe we'd remember the good times with his father, the Sunday dinners, the fishing trips, the way Richard used to make Deshaun laugh until milk came out of his nose. But David wasn't crying. He was smiling. The will was read, he said, loosening his tie. His eyes had a shine to them I'd never seen before, cold and hungry, like a stranger wearing my husband's face. I turned from the mirror, my dress half unzipped. Already? I thought Attorney Hayes said next week. He pulled me aside. Wanted to give me the highlights. David walked to the window, looking out at the garden where guests mingled with plates of potato salad and fried chicken. My potato salad. I'd been up since 4 that morning cooking for these people, making sure Richard had a proper home going. Dad left me everything, Janet. Everything. The way he said my name made my skin prickle. The house in Martha's Vineyard. The brownstone in Brooklyn. The investment properties. The yacht. He counted on his fingers like a child listing Christmas presents. $18 million, Janet. 18 million. I should have been happy for him. For us. That money could change Deshaun's life, secure his college fund, let us finally take that trip to Ghana we'd always talked about. But something in David's voice made me pause. That's wonderful, baby, I said slowly. Your daddy wanted to take care of you. Take care of us. David turned from the window. The smile was still there, but it wasn't reaching his eyes. About that, he said. Attorney Hayes mentioned you got something too. My heart lifted just a little. Maybe Richard had left me something personal, his mother's ring, or that quilt his grandmother made, the one he knew I loved. Something to remember him by. He left you an envelope. I waited for more. There had to be more. That's it, David said. Just an old envelope. Hayes said it was in Dad's personal safe. Your name was on it. The room suddenly felt smaller. Colder. An envelope, I repeated. Yeah. David's smile twisted into something uglier. I guess Dad knew where his loyalty should be. With his blood. Not with... He waved his hand at me dismissively. The words hit me like a slap. 15 years. 15 years of marriage, of standing by this man through his failed business ventures, his drinking phase, his depression after losing his job. 15 years of loving his father like he was my own, of Sunday dinners and holiday traditions and being there. And David was looking at me like I was nothing. Where's Deshaun? I asked, my voice barely steady. At Mom's sister's house. Playing with his cousins. David checked his watch, a new Rolex I noticed for the first time. When had he gotten that? Look, Janet, we need to talk about some things. About the future. Our future, I said, trying to find the man I married somewhere in his eyes. My future, he corrected. Things are going to change around here. I'm not the same person I was last week. I'm a wealthy man now. I have options. Opportunities. My hands started shaking. I gripped the edge of the dresser to steady myself. What are you saying, David? He sighed like I was a slow child who couldn't understand simple math. I'm saying that maybe we rushed into things. We got married young. We didn't know who we'd become. And now, he spread his arms wide. Now I know who I am. I'm Richard Parker's son. I'm a man of means. And I need a partner who fits that life. The room started spinning. Downstairs I could hear laughter. Someone was telling a story about Richard, about the time he accidentally caught a boot instead of a fish. People were celebrating his life, remembering his kindness, his humor, his love. And up here, his son was destroying everything Richard had taught him about family, about loyalty, about love. You want a divorce, I said flatly. I want us both to be happy, David said, but his eyes were already distant, already planning his new life without me in it. You'll be fine, Janet. You're a nurse. You can take care of yourself. And the envelope, who knows? Maybe Dad left you a little something in there. A few thousand to help you get settled. A few thousand. 15 years reduced to a few $1,000s and a dusty envelope. Get out, I whispered. What? Get out. The scream tore from my throat before I could stop it. Get out of this room. Get away from me. David's face hardened. This is my house now, Janet. Don't forget that. Everything here belongs to me. The furniture, the car, the television, all of it. So maybe you should watch your tone. He walked to the door, paused, and looked back at me with something that might have been pity if there was any warmth behind it. Attorney Hayes will have that envelope ready for you tomorrow. You can pick it up from his office. He straightened his tie. I'm going back downstairs. Try to pull yourself together before you come down. People are asking about you. Don't embarrass me at my father's funeral. The door closed behind him with a soft click. I stood there, frozen, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The same face I'd seen that morning. The same brown eyes, the same full cheeks, the same small scar on my chin from when I'd fallen off my bike at age 7. But somehow I looked different. Smaller. Like I was disappearing right in front of myself. Through the window I could see David rejoining the guests. Someone clapped him on the shoulder. He laughed, throwing his head back, playing the grieving son perfectly. No one down there knew what had just happened. No one knew that my marriage had just died in the same week we buried Richard. My phone buzzed in my purse. A text from Simone. You okay? Haven't seen you in a while. David said you were lying down. I wanted to text back to tell her everything, to scream and cry and break something. But my fingers wouldn't move. I just stood there watching my husband charm a crowd of people who had no idea who he really was. The envelope. Tomorrow I'd get the envelope. Maybe David was right. Maybe Richard had left me a little money, a parting gift to ease his conscience about leaving everything to his son. A few $1,000s wouldn't change anything, but it might buy me time to figure out my next move. I changed into jeans and a simple black shirt. Washed my face. Put on fresh lipstick. Made myself look presentable. Then I went downstairs to play the role of the grieving daughter-in-law one last time. But as I smiled and accepted condolences and thanked people for coming, I made myself a promise. Whatever was in that envelope, whatever Richard had left me, I would survive this. I would find a way to stand on my own 2 feet. I had no idea that the envelope sitting in Attorney Hayes' office would do more than just help me survive. It would change everything. Attorney Bernard Hayes' office smelled like old books and lemon furniture polish. The kind of smell that usually made me feel calm, secure, like everything was going to be handled properly. Today it just made my stomach turn. I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw David's face, that cold, hungry look. That smile. I'd spent the night in the guest room while David snored peacefully in our bed, probably dreaming about yachts and mansions. When I came downstairs that morning, he was already gone. No note. No text. Just an empty coffee cup in the sink that he didn't bother to rinse. Mrs. Parker. Attorney Hayes stood when his secretary showed me in. He was a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes that reminded me of Richard. They'd been friends for 30 years. Please sit down. I sank into the leather chair across from his massive desk. My purse felt heavy in my lap. I brought my checkbook, my ID, whatever documents I might need to start my new life. The life of a soon-to-be divorced single mother. How are you holding up? He asked gently. The question almost broke me. I wanted to tell him everything. How David had changed overnight. How he'd looked at me like I was garbage. How I'd heard him on the phone this morning, laughing with someone, saying soon, in a voice that made my skin crawl. But I just said, I'm managing. Attorney Hayes nodded slowly. He opened a drawer and pulled out a manila envelope, aged and slightly dusty. My name was written across the front in Richard's distinctive handwriting, for Janet Parker. To be opened only by her. My hands trembled as I reached for it. Richard brought this to me 3 months ago, Attorney Hayes said quietly. He made me promise not to mention it in the official will reading. Said it was private. Between you and him. 3 months ago. Right after Richard's first heart attack. Right after the doctors told him his time was limited. Did he say what was in it? I whispered. No. But he said. Attorney Hayes leaned forward, his voice dropping. He said, Bernard, my son is about to show his true colors. When he does, Janet is going to need this. Make sure she gets it. Make sure David doesn't know about it. My throat tightened. He knew. Richard knew David would do this. Richard was a wise man. He saw things clearly, especially about people. Attorney Hayes stood and walked to the window, giving me privacy. Take your time, Mrs. Parker. I'll be right outside if you need anything. The door clicked shut behind him. I stared at the envelope. It was heavier than I expected. My fingers traced Richard's handwriting, remembering all the birthday cards he'd sent, the little notes he'd leave on the kitchen counter. Proud of you, Janet. You're the daughter I always wanted. I'd cried when I found that note. David had rolled his eyes. Taking a deep breath, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded neatly. And beneath it, something else. Something that made my heart stop. A bank card. My hands shook as I unfolded the letter. Richard's handwriting filled the page. My dearest Janet, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And if Bernard gave this to you separately, then David has shown you who he really is. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry you had to learn this way. I've known for a while that my son has lost his way. I've watched him grow bitter, resentful, hungry for things that don't matter. I've watched him take you for granted, ignore your sacrifices, forget your love. I thought maybe he'd change. Maybe he'd wake up and see what he had. But I'm not a fool. I know my son. And I know that the minute money enters the picture, David will become someone you don't recognize. So I made plans. Plans to protect you. Plans to make sure you're taken care of. The bank card in this envelope is connected to an account I opened in your name 5 years ago. I've been adding to it regularly. Money from investments David doesn't know about. Money from accounts I kept private. Money that legally belongs to me and me alone to distribute as I see fit. The current balance is $22 million. The letter fell from my hands. $22 million. I read the number again, sure I was seeing it wrong. Sure this was a dream, a breakdown, a grief-induced hallucination. But the numbers didn't change. $22 million. $4 million more than David's inheritance. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely pick up the letter again. I know this is shocking. I know you probably think it's too much. But Janet, you've earned every penny. You held my hand during chemo. You drove me to appointments when David was too busy. You made me laugh when I wanted to give up. You loved me like I was your own father. More than that, you've been the glue holding this family together. You've raised Deshawn to be kind and thoughtful. You've worked double shifts to help pay bills when David's business failed. You've sacrificed and given and loved without ever asking for anything in return. This money is yours. Not David's. Yours. But here's what I need you to understand. Don't tell David about this immediately. Take your time. Get your ducks in a row. Protect yourself legally. Protect Deshawn. Then when you're ready, when you're safe, you can decide what to do. Maybe you'll use it to start fresh. Maybe you'll use it to fight for what's yours. Maybe you'll use it to show David that his father knew exactly who deserved to be taken care of. I've also left instructions with Bernard. He'll help you. Trust him. You are strong, Janet. Stronger than you know. And you are loved. Never forget that. Your father in heart, Richard. I was crying before I realized it. Big, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. I pressed the letter to my chest and let myself break down in a way I hadn't since my mother died. Richard had known. He'd seen everything. And he protected me. A soft knock on the door. Mrs. Parker? Are you all right? I wiped my eyes, trying to compose myself. Yes, come in. Attorney Hayes entered slowly, reading my face. When he saw the letter clutched in my hand, he nodded knowingly. He told you, he said simply. $22 million, I whispered, like saying it too loud would make it disappear. 22.4 actually. The account has been accruing interest. Attorney Hayes sat down and pulled out a folder. Richard and I spent months setting this up. The money is completely legal, completely yours. David has no claim to it. It never appears in the estate documents. As far as the law is concerned, Richard made a gift to you years ago, and it's been growing ever since. But how? Richard was smarter than David ever gave him credit for. He had investments David didn't know about. Property David never visited. Accounts in his name alone. Attorney Hayes slid the folder across the desk. It's all documented. All legal. All yours. I stared at the folder like it might explode. What do I do now? My voice sounded small, lost. Now. Attorney Hayes leaned back in his chair. Now you take some time. You process this. You make a plan. Richard's letter was right, don't tell David yet. Get yourself in a strong position first. File for divorce if that's what you want. Secure custody of Deshawn. Then when you're ready, he smiled slightly. Then you can let David know that his father was much wiser than he thought. I looked down at the bank card in my lap. A simple piece of plastic that represented everything. Security, freedom, justice, revenge. The thought came unbidden and I felt guilty for even thinking it. But then I remembered David's face yesterday. The way he'd dismissed me. The way he'd said, "This is my house now." The way he'd made me feel worthless. Maybe revenge wasn't the right word. Maybe it was just balance. There's something else, Attorney Hayes said carefully. Richard left a video message. For you only. Would you like to see it? My heart clenched. Yes, please. He turned his laptop around. On the screen, Richard sat in this very office probably just months ago. He looked tired, thinner than I remembered, but his eyes were bright and clear. Attorney Hayes pressed play. Hello, sweetheart. Richard's voice filled the room and fresh tears spilled down my cheeks. If you're watching this, then Bernard gave you the envelope. And if he gave you the envelope, then David broke your heart. I'm so sorry, Janet. I raised him better than this. Or at least I tried. He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. I want you to know something. David getting that money isn't a mistake. I gave it to him deliberately. Because I needed to see what he'd do with it. I needed to see if he'd become the man I hoped he'd be, or if he'd become what I feared. Richard's expression hardened. Money shows you who people really are. It's like holding up a mirror to someone's soul. And I knew in my gut that David would fail this test. I just prayed I was wrong. He paused, gathering himself. But you, Janet, you would have passed. You would have used that money to help people, to lift up your community, to take care of Deshaun. That's who you are. That's why you got the bigger inheritance. $22 million wasn't just money, I realized. It was Richard's way of saying, I see you. I know your worth. And I'm making sure the world knows it too. Be smart, sweetheart. Be careful. But most of all, be free. You've earned it. The video ended. I sat in silence, holding the bank card, feeling the weight of Richard's love and David's betrayal all at once. Take your time, Attorney Hayes said softly. There's no rush. The money isn't going anywhere. But I was already standing, already moving, my mind already spinning with plans. I need to open a bank account David doesn't know about, I said, my voice steady now. I need to talk to a divorce lawyer. I need to secure Deshaun's school records. I have a list, Attorney Hayes interrupted gently, pulling out another folder. Richard anticipated everything. Divorce attorneys he trusted. Financial advisors. Security experts. Even a therapist for Deshaun if needed. Of course he did. Of course Richard thought of everything. I took the folder with shaking hands. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for helping him protect me. Richard was my best friend, Attorney Hayes said, his eyes glistening. And you were his daughter in every way that mattered. Protecting you was an honor. I left his office with the envelope tucked safely in my purse, the bank card hidden in my wallet, and Richard's letter folded against my heart. David thought he'd won. But the game had just begun. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with numbers and possibilities. $22 million. The words kept repeating in my head like a prayer, like a shield, like armor against everything David had said to me. But when I pulled into the driveway, reality came crashing back. David's car was parked at an angle, blocking the garage like he owned the whole street now. Like he owned everything. Inside I could hear music. Loud, expensive-sounding jazz that Richard used to hate. David had never liked jazz either, but apparently wealthy David had different tastes. I walked through the front door and stopped dead. Our living room had been rearranged. The furniture Richard had given us, solid oak pieces his own father had made, had been pushed against the walls. In their place sat sleek modern furniture I didn't recognize, all sharp angles and black leather. The family photos were gone from the mantel. The cross my mother had given us was missing from above the fireplace. In its place hung a massive painting of a yacht. You're back. David emerged from the kitchen, holding a glass of something amber-colored. Day drinking now. That was new too. What did Hayes give you? A savings bond? A nice pen? I gripped my purse tighter, feeling the envelope inside. Just some personal items. Letters. David snorted. Of course. The great Richard Parker, always with the words. He gestured around the room. What do you think? I had an interior designer come by this morning. We're going to redo the whole house. Get rid of all this old people furniture. Make it modern. Sophisticated. This is your father's furniture, I said quietly. He made some of these pieces himself. Yeah, well, Dad's gone. And I'm not living in a museum. David drained his glass and set it down on Richard's handmade coffee table without a coaster. I watched the condensation ring form on the wood and felt something crack inside me. Where's Deshaun? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Still at Aunt Teresa's. I told her we needed a few days to handle estate stuff. Kid doesn't need to be underfoot right now. He just lost his grandfather. He needs his parents. He'll be fine. Kids are resilient. David poured himself another drink. Besides, I've got plans this weekend. The yacht club is having a gala on Saturday. Members only. I'm going to apply for membership now that I can actually afford it. The yacht club. The same one that had rejected David's membership application 5 years ago because he couldn't afford the fees. He'd been bitter about it for months. I didn't know you still wanted to join, I said carefully. There's a lot you don't know about me, Janet. David's eyes were cold. A lot I've had to keep buried because we were broke. Because I was stuck in a dead-end job, married to a woman who couldn't understand my potential. The words hit like fists. Your potential, I repeated slowly. Yeah, my potential. Did you know I was supposed to go to Harvard? But Dad cut me off sophomore year because he didn't like my choices. Said I needed to learn responsibility. David's face twisted with old resentment. So I had to transfer to state school. Had to watch all my friends succeed while I struggled. Had to marry the first girl who... He stopped himself, but the damage was done. The first girl who what, David? My voice was ice now. The first girl who loved you? Who stood by you? Who gave up her scholarship to nursing school at Duke so you could take that job in Baltimore? That was your choice, David said dismissively. I never asked you to do that. But he had. He'd cried about it. Said he couldn't make it without me. Said we were a team. That was 10 years ago. A lifetime ago. I'm going out, David announced, checking his new watch again. Got some meetings? Might be late. Don't wait up. Meetings? At 3 in the afternoon? Business meetings. You wouldn't understand. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Janet? Start packing up your stuff. I'm going to need the master bedroom for the master of the house. You can take the guest room. The door slammed behind him before I could respond. I stood there in the middle of my destroyed living room, surrounded by ugly new furniture and the ghost of a marriage that had died yesterday. My phone buzzed. A text from Simone. Coffee tomorrow? You sound like you need it. I texted back. Yes. Desperately. 10 a.m.? I'll bring tissues. And wine. Despite everything, I smiled a little. Simone always knew. I spent the rest of the afternoon moving my clothes to the guest room. Not because David told me to, but because I couldn't stand to sleep in that bed anymore. Every time I looked at it, I saw his face from yesterday. That cold, hungry smile. As I was hanging up my work scrubs, I heard David's phone buzz on the charger in the kitchen. He'd forgotten it in his rush to leave. The screen lit up with a message preview. Candace, can't wait for Saturday night, baby. Wear the cologne I like. Kiss Mark. My blood ran cold. Candace Mitchell. The woman who'd been at Richard's funeral, crying dramatically, wearing a dress so tight I'd wondered how she could breathe. The woman who'd touched David's arm and said, if you need anything, I'm here. The woman whose perfume I'd smelled on David's jacket 2 months ago when he claimed he'd been working late. With shaking hands, I picked up his phone. I knew his passcode. It used to be our anniversary. But when I tried it, the phone blinked. Incorrect password. He changed it. I tried his birthday. Deshawn's birthday. Richard's birthday. Nothing worked. But I didn't need to unlock the phone to understand what was happening. David had someone else. Had probably had someone else for a while. Maybe the inheritance just gave him the excuse he needed to trade up, to trade me in for a newer model who matched his new life. The phone buzzed again. Candace, already picked out my dress. Red. Your favorite. We're going to look so good together. Together. At the yacht club gala. As a couple. I set the phone down carefully like it might explode. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady. Cold. Sure. I pulled out my own phone and called Simone. Tomorrow morning's too late, I said when she answered. Can you come over now? What happened? Her voice instantly shifted to worried. Janet, what did he do? Everything, I whispered. He did everything. 20 minutes later, Simone burst through my door with a bottle of wine, a box of tissues, and murder in her eyes. We'd been best friends since high school, and she knew me well enough to read disaster on my face. Talk, she demanded, kicking off her heels and pouring us both glasses of wine that were really more like mugs of wine. Tell me everything. So I did. I told her about the inheritance. About David's transformation. About the furniture and the yacht club and the cold way he dismissed me. And finally about the text messages from Candace. That cheating son of a... Simone stopped herself, remembering we were in my house, in my half-destroyed living room. Janet, we need to document everything. Those text messages. The furniture he bought without consulting you. We need evidence for the divorce. There's something else. I pulled out the envelope, the letter, the bank card. Richard left me something. Simone's eyes widened as she read the letter. By the time she got to the number, her jaw had literally dropped. $22 million, she breathed. Richard left you $22 million. More than David got, I confirmed. Simone stared at me. Then she started laughing. Big, gasping laughs that shouldn't have been funny but somehow were. Oh my God. Oh my God. David has no idea, does he? None. And Candace? Does she know David's being outplayed by the wife he's trying to discard? Not yet. Simone's laugh faded into something sharper. More focused. So what are you going to do? I thought about David's face yesterday. About the text messages. About Richard's letter and his video and his wisdom. I'm going to follow Richard's advice, I said slowly. I'm going to be smart. Be careful. And then, I met Simone's eyes. Then I'm going to show David and Candace exactly who they're dealing with. That's my girl. Simone raised her wine glass. To Richard Parker. The wisest man who ever lived. To Richard, I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. And to Justice. We drank, and for the first time since Richard's funeral, I felt something other than pain. I felt powerful. The next morning, I woke up in the guest room to the sound of silence. David hadn't come home. His side of the house was empty, his car gone from the driveway. Part of me felt relieved. Part of me felt sick. But mostly I felt clear-headed. Ready. I had 3 days until the yacht club gala. 3 days to get everything in place. I called in sick to work first time in 5 years and drove to the bank attorney Hayes had recommended. It was in downtown Baltimore, 30 minutes from our neighborhood, far enough that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. The bank manager, a professional black woman named Lorraine Davis who looked to be in her late 50s, greeted me with a firm handshake and knowing eyes. Mrs. Parker, she said warmly. Attorney Hayes called ahead. I understand we're setting up some accounts for you? Yes. I pulled out the bank card Richard had left me. I need to understand exactly what I have. And I need to make sure it stays protected. Lorraine led me to a private office and spent the next 2 hours walking me through everything. The account balanced $22.4 million, just like Attorney Hayes said. The investment portfolio Richard had built. The way the interest was compounding. The tax implications. The legal protections already in place. Mr. Parker was very thorough, Lorraine said, showing me document after document. This money is yours free and clear. Your husband has no legal claim to it. It was a gift made years ago, properly documented, with all taxes paid. Can David find out about it? Not unless you tell him. Or unless he somehow gets access to your personal documents. Lorraine leaned forward. Mrs. Parker, I don't know your situation and it's not my place to ask. But Attorney Hayes mentioned you might be going through some changes. Would you like me to recommend a divorce attorney? Attorney Hayes already gave me names. But yes, I'd appreciate your recommendation too. Lorraine wrote down a name. Sandra Chin. She's tough, fair, and she doesn't lose. Tell her I sent you. By the time I left the bank, I had new accounts set up, a plan for managing the money, and a meeting scheduled with Sandra Chin for that afternoon. I also had something else, a sense of control I hadn't felt in days. Sandra Chin's office was in a glass tower that gleamed in the afternoon sun. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and sharper clothes. Tell me everything, she said after we'd settled into her office. Don't leave anything out. So I told her. The inheritance. David's transformation. The affair. The way he dismissed me. The furniture. The text messages. Sandra took notes, her expression never changing. When I finished, she set down her pen. First things first, you're going to be fine. Better than fine. She pulled out a legal pad. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to file for divorce on the grounds of adultery. We're going to request full custody of your son with supervised visitation for David. We're going to freeze all joint assets. And we're going to make sure David understands that his father's money doesn't mean a damn thing in Maryland family court. When? I asked. When do you want me to file? I thought about Saturday night. The yacht club. David and Candace dressed up and showing off, thinking they'd won. Monday, I said. File on Monday morning. Sandra smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who enjoyed her job. Monday it is. Now, about your assets. David doesn't know about them, I interrupted. The money Richard left me. David thinks I got nothing. Sandra's eyes lit up. How much are we talking? $22.4 million. Sandra actually laughed. Oh, this is going to be good. This is going to be really good. She made more notes. We'll keep that quiet for now. No reason to show our full hand until we have. But Mrs. Parker, you need to understand something. That money protects you. It means you don't need anything from David. Which means we can fight as hard as we need to without worrying about your financial security. What about Deshaun? Deshaun stays with you. The courts favor stability and you're the stable parent. Plus, with evidence of David's affair, his sudden personality change, his neglect of his son. Sandra shrugged. Unless David has evidence against you, which I'm guessing he doesn't, Deshaun is yours. We spent another hour going over strategy, documents I needed to gather, things I needed to record. By the time I left, my head was swimming but my heart was steady. I was building a foundation. Piece by piece. Step by step. That evening, I picked up Deshaun from Aunt Teresa's house. My son ran to me, his 8-year-old arms wrapping around my waist, and I held him tight, breathing in his little boy's smell of grass and sunshine and bubble gum. I missed you, Mama, he said into my stomach. I missed you too, baby. I kissed the top of his head. So much. In the car, Deshaun was quieter than usual. He stared out the window, his small face troubled. Mama, he said finally. Is Daddy okay? My heart clenched. What do you mean, sweetie? He seems different. Since Grandpa died. He doesn't smile the same. Deshaun looked at me with Richard's eyes, kind and wise beyond his years. Did I do something wrong? No, baby. No. You didn't do anything wrong. I reached over and squeezed his hand. Daddy's just going through some things. Grown-up things. But it has nothing to do with you. You are perfect exactly as you are. Do you promise? I promise with my whole heart. When we got home, David's car was in the driveway. I braced myself, but when we walked in, David was all smiles. There's my boy. He swooped Deshaun up, spinning him around. Deshaun giggled, and the sound broke my heart because it was so genuine, so full of love for a father who was about to abandon him. Dad, put me down. Deshaun laughed. David set him down, ruffling his hair. Go wash up for dinner, buddy. I ordered pizza. Deshaun ran off, and David's smile faded the second he was out of sight. We need to talk, he said quietly. About what? About the divorce papers I had drawn up. You'll find them fair. You keep your car, your personal items. I'll give you 6 months to find a new place. I'll pay child support according to the state guidelines. Joint custody, alternating weekends. He slid a manila envelope across the counter, so similar to Richard's envelope, but filled with poison instead of love. You already had papers drawn up, I said flatly. 2 days after your father died. Don't be dramatic. This is business, Janet. Let's handle it like adults. I picked up the envelope but didn't open it. When did you want me to sign these? Sooner is better than later. No point dragging it out. David pulled out his phone. He'd retrieved it from the charger this morning. I'll have my lawyer file by Monday. We can be done with this whole mess by Christmas. Done with this whole mess. That's what our 15-year marriage was to him. A mess to clean up. I'll have my lawyer look at them, I said calmly. David blinked. Your lawyer? Janet, you can't afford a lawyer. I'll find a way. Something flickered across his face, irritation, maybe, or suspicion. But then Deshaun came bounding back into the kitchen, and David's mask slipped back into place. We ate pizza together, the three of us, like a normal family. David told jokes and asked Deshaun about school. He played the perfect dad, the grieving son trying to keep life normal for his kid. And I played along. I smiled and laughed and cleaned up the paper plates. I tucked Deshaun into bed and read him 2 chapters of his favorite book. I kissed his forehead and told him I loved him more than all the stars in the sky. Then I went to the guest room, closed the door, and called Sandra Chin. He already had divorce papers drawn up, I told her. He's planning to file Monday. Good, Sandra said. I could hear her typing. Let him file. Let him think he's in control. Then we'll file our countersuit. With photos of those text messages, with documentation of his spending, with everything we've got. What about the yacht club on Saturday? Sandra paused. What about it? An idea was forming in my head. A way to expose David and Candace in front of the very people they wanted to impress. A way to show everyone who David really was. What if I went? I said slowly. What if I showed up at the gala? As what? A wronged wife making a scene. No. I smiled in the darkness. As Richard Parker's daughter. As the woman his father actually trusted. As someone who belongs there more than David ever will. There was a long pause. Then Sandra laughed, low and appreciative. Mrs. Parker, I think you and I are going to get along just fine. Friday morning, I dropped Deshaun at school and headed to the hospital for an emergency shift. I told them I'd recovered from my illness, but the truth was I needed to be around normal people. People who weren't lying to me. People whose lives made sense. Lorraine Davis was waiting in the cafeteria when I got there. Not the bank manager Lorraine Davis, my mentor, the charge nurse who'd trained me when I first started at Baltimore General 10 years ago. She was sitting at our usual table by the window, 2 cups of coffee already cooling in front of her. "Sit," she commanded when she saw me. "You look terrible." I collapsed into the chair. "Thanks. I feel terrible." Lorraine pushed a coffee toward me. "I heard. Hospital gossip moves fast. Your father-in-law passed, God rest his soul. David inherited a fortune. You got, what? A sympathy card? Something like that." I wrapped my hands around the cup, soaking in the warmth. "And?" Lorraine fixed me with those sharp brown eyes that could spot a lie from across a surgical suite. "What aren't you telling me?" So I told her. Not everything, not about the money Richard left me, that secret needed to stay buried a little longer, but everything else. The affair. The divorce papers. David's transformation. The way he looked at me now. Lorraine listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sat back and crossed her arms. "That boy is a fool," she said flatly. "You're the best thing that ever happened to him. But you know what? Sometimes God removes people from our lives to make room for his blessings. I don't feel very blessed right now." "You will." Lorraine leaned forward. "Janet, I've watched you for 10 years. You're the nurse everyone requests. You're the one families thank by name. You're the one who stays late to hold a scared patient's hand. You give and give and give, and you never ask for anything back. That's just my job." "No, it's who you are." And David never appreciated it. Lorraine pulled out her phone. "Now, I'm going to tell you something. The hospital is opening a new community health center in West Baltimore. They need a director. Someone with nursing experience, community connections, and heart. Someone who can build something from the ground up." My heart started beating faster. "Lorraine. They offered it to me first. I turned it down because I'm retiring next year. But I told them I knew the perfect person." She slid her phone across the table. On the screen was an email. An official job offer. Director of Community Health. Salary, $120,000 a year. "That's twice what I make now," I whispered. "It's what you're worth. What you've always been worth." Lorraine squeezed my hand. "You don't need David's money, Janet. You never did. You can stand on your own 2 feet. You can build your own empire." I stared at the job offer, feeling something shift inside me. Even without Richard's money, I could make it. I could more than make it. I could thrive. "When do they need an answer?" "End of the month." "But Janet?" Lorraine's voice softened. "Whatever you're planning for that man, do it smart. Do it clean. And do it in a way that lets you sleep at night." I thought about Richard's letter. About his wisdom. About the way he'd planned everything to protect me while still giving David a chance to be better. "I will," I promised. "For Richard. For Deshawn. For myself." That afternoon, Simone picked me up from work. "Emergency shopping trip," she announced. "You need a dress for tomorrow night." "I'm not sure I should go." "Oh, you're going. We're just deciding what kind of statement you're making." Simone pulled into the parking lot of an upscale boutique I'd never dared enter before. "Now come on. We've got work to do." Inside, a sales associate named Patricia took one look at us and knew we meant business. "I need a dress for a yacht club gala," I told her. "Something that says, 'I belong here more than you think I do.'" Patricia's eyes sparkled with understanding. "I have just the thing." The dress she brought out was midnight blue, the color of the ocean at dusk. It was elegant, sophisticated, and utterly perfect. When I tried it on, I barely recognized myself. The woman in the mirror looked powerful, confident, unbreakable. "That's the one," Simone breathed. "That's definitely the one." "It's $300, I said, checking the tag. "So?" Simone raised an eyebrow. "You've got 22 million in the bank. Buy the dress. Buy the shoes. Buy the armor you need to walk into that room and show everyone who you really are." She was right. This wasn't about the money. It was about the message. I bought the dress. And the shoes. And a simple gold necklace that Patricia said completed the look perfectly. As we left the boutique, Simone linked her arm through mine. "You know what tomorrow night is really about, right? Showing David he can't break me?" "No." Simone stopped walking and turned to face me. "It's about showing yourself. Showing yourself that you're more than someone's wife. More than someone's mother. You're Janet Parker. And you're magnificent all on your own." Tears stung my eyes. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You were just too busy taking care of everyone else to notice." She pulled me into a hug. Tomorrow night we're doing this together. You're not walking into that yacht club alone. You're coming with me? Girl, please. You think I'm missing this? Simone grinned. I already bought my dress. It's red. It's fierce. And I'm going to be right by your side when you walk in and blow everyone's mind. That evening, after Deshawn was in bed, I sat at the kitchen table with David's divorce papers spread out in front of me. Sandra Chin had already reviewed them and sent me her notes. Insulting. Offensive. We can do better. David wanted to keep everything. The house. The cars. The furniture. The yacht he'd inherited but never actually visited. He was offering me the bare minimum in child support and 6 months to vacate the premises. It was the agreement of a man who thought he held all the cards. I heard David come home around midnight. He stumbled in, clearly drunk, and didn't even notice me sitting there in the semi-darkness. Janet? He called out, heading for the master bedroom. Then he remembered and veered toward the guest room. All right. You're in there now. He banged on the guest room door. I stayed perfectly still at the kitchen table, waiting. Janet, we need to talk about tomorrow night. I don't want you making any scenes. Embarrassing me. You understand? This is important. I said nothing. Eventually he gave up and stumbled to the master bedroom, slamming the door behind him. I looked down at the divorce papers and smiled. David thought tomorrow night was going to be his debut. His introduction to high society. His chance to show off his new wealth and his new woman. He had no idea it was going to be his reckoning. My phone buzzed with a text from Attorney Hayes. Everything set for Monday morning. Documents ready. Richard would be proud of you. I texted back, thank you. For everything. Then I texted Sandra Chin. See you Monday. Let's finish this. Finally, I pulled out my own phone and looked at the photos I'd secretly taken. David's text messages to Candace. The receipts for the furniture he'd bought without consulting me. The credit card statements showing expensive dinners at restaurants we'd never been to together. Evidence. Protection. Power. I was ready. Tomorrow night, David and Candace would walk into that yacht club thinking they were untouchable. Thinking they'd won. Thinking the wronged wife would stay home and cry into her pillow. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I was Richard Parker's daughter. I was Deshawn's mother. I was a nurse, a friend, a fighter. And I was about to remind everyone, especially David, that you can't measure someone's worth by the money in their bank account. Even if that bank account had $22 million in it. Saturday evening arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, gentle breeze, the kind of night that made wealthy people feel like the universe was smiling on them. I spent the day with Deshawn, taking him to the aquarium, buying him ice cream, soaking in his laughter and innocent joy. When I dropped him back at Aunt Teresa's, she'd agreed to keep him overnight. He hugged me tight. You look pretty, Mama, he said, touching the edge of my dress that I'd let him see. Like a princess. Thank you, baby. You be good for Aunt Teresa, okay? I will. Are you going somewhere fancy? Something like that. Is Daddy going too? I hesitated. Yes. Daddy's going to be there. Deshawn's face fell just a little. Will you tell him I love him? He forgot to say it this morning. My heart cracked. I'll tell him, sweetie. I promise. At 6 o'clock, Simone arrived at my house in her red dress, looking like she was ready to set the world on fire. Ready? She asked, taking in my midnight blue dress, my simple jewelry, my confident makeup. Ready? I confirmed. We took a cab to the yacht club. I didn't want to deal with parking, and I wanted David to see me arrive. The building was lit up like a beacon, perched on the waterfront with its white columns and expensive boats bobbing in the marina. At the entrance, a man with a clipboard was checking names. Name? He asked when we approached. Janet Parker, I said clearly. Guest of Richard Parker Sr. The man's face changed immediately, softening with recognition and sympathy. Oh, Mrs. Parker. I'm so sorry for your loss. Mr. Parker was a good man. A founding member of this club. Thank you. He was. And he had you on the permanent guest list. The man made a note. You're always welcome here. Always. David hadn't known that. He'd been so busy applying for his own membership, bragging about his inheritance, that he'd forgotten his father had already secured my place here years ago. Simone and I walked through the doors into a world of crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, and people dripping in diamonds. A string quartet played in the corner. Waiters circulated with tiny, perfect hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than a tank of gas. And there across the room was David. He wore a tuxedo I'd never seen before, probably bought this week with his new money. His hair was perfectly styled. His shoes gleamed. He looked like he'd been born into this world, like he'd always belonged here. And on his arm was Candace. She read the dress from her text messages. Tight, expensive, attention-grabbing. Her laugh was too loud, her gestures too big. She was trying so hard to look like she belonged that it was obvious she didn't. David saw me at the same moment I saw him. His face went white, then red, then white again. He started walking toward me, Candace stumbling along in her too high heels. "What are you doing here?" he hissed when he reached me. "I told you not to come." "This isn't your club, David," I said calmly. "Your father was a member. I'm his guest. I have every right to be here." "Guest? You're embarrassing me. Showing up at my event." "Your event?" A voice interrupted from behind us. An older white man with kind eyes and a commanding presence stepped forward. "David, I believe you're mistaken. This is the club's annual charity gala. It's not anyone's personal event." David's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Mr. Harrison. I didn't mean." "And Mrs. Parker." Mr. Harrison turned to me with a warm smile. "Richard spoke of you often. Called you the daughter of his heart. We were devastated to hear of his passing. He was one of our finest members." "Thank you," I said, shaking his hand. "He spoke highly of this club. Of the community work you do." "Yes, well, we try to give back." Mr. Harrison glanced at David with something that might have been disappointment. "Richard was particularly passionate about our scholarship fund. Donated generously every year. I hope that tradition will continue." David shifted uncomfortably. "Of course. I'm planning to review all of Dad's charitable commitments." "Review them?" Mr. Harrison's eyebrows rose. "I see. Well, we'll be in touch about that." He nodded to me. "Mrs. Parker, it was lovely to see you again. Please enjoy the evening. You honor your father-in-law's memory by being here." He walked away, leaving David fuming. "Again?" David spat. He said, "Again. You've been here before?" "Many times. With Richard. While you were too busy with work to join us." I smiled sweetly. He liked having someone who appreciated the history of the club, the traditions, the community service aspect. Candace, who'd been silent this whole time, finally found her voice. "David, I thought you said she wasn't coming. You said she was at home. Crying." "I never cry," I lied smoothly. "At least not over things that aren't worth my tears." Candace's face flushed. "Excuse me? Ladies, please." David grabbed Candace's arm. "Let's go get some champagne." "Excellent idea," Simone said, speaking for the first time. "Janet and I were just about to do the same." "See you around, David." We walked away, leaving David and Candace standing there. I could feel their eyes burning into my back. "That was amazing," Simone whispered as we grabbed champagne flutes from a passing waiter. "Did you see his face? He looked like he was going to have a stroke." "We're just getting started," I murmured back. For the next hour I worked the room. I spoke to people who remembered Richard, who shared stories about his kindness and generosity. I laughed at their jokes and asked about their children and showed genuine interest in their lives. And slowly people started to notice. Started to see me not as David's poor, abandoned wife, but as Richard Parker's beloved daughter-in-law. As someone who belonged in this room. David and Candace, meanwhile, were struggling. Candace's laugh was too loud. David's stories about his inheritance were falling flat. People kept gravitating away from them toward me. At 8 o'clock, Mr. Harrison took the stage to make announcements about the charity auction. "Before we begin bidding," he said, "I want to acknowledge a special guest tonight. Janet Parker, daughter-in-law of our late, great Richard Parker." "Janet, could you stand please?" My heart pounded as I rose. The room applauded, and I saw David's face go purple with rage. "Richard spoke often of your dedication to nursing, of your community service, of your beautiful heart," Mr. Harrison continued. "He told me once that you were the finest example of service above self that he'd ever known. We're honored to have you here tonight." The applause grew louder. People were smiling at me, nodding, showing respect. I sat down, feeling Richard's presence so strongly it almost hurt. This was his final gift to me, not just money but respect. Recognition. A place in a world that David was trying to claim as his own. As the auction began, Candace leaned over to David and said something I couldn't hear. But I could read her lips. "Why didn't you tell me about her?" David's response was sharp, angry. They were fighting. Right there in the middle of the gala. Perfect. During a break in the auction, I excused myself to use the restroom. I was touching up my lipstick when Candace walked in. We stared at each other in the mirror. "That was quite a speech," Candace said finally, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Mr. Harrison is a kind man. Richard meant a lot to him." "Richard?" Always Richard. Candace turned to face me directly. You know David's moving on, right? He's done with the old life. Done with you. I know, I said calmly. He made that very clear. So why are you here? To make trouble? To embarrass him? I'm here because Richard would have wanted me here. Because I belong here. Because I've earned my place in this community through years of showing up, contributing, and caring about people. I turned to face her. Why are you here, Candace? Her face flushed. I'm here with David. My boyfriend. Your boyfriend who's still married. Your boyfriend who abandoned his 8-year-old son this week. Your boyfriend who's spending money that isn't even his yet because the estate hasn't finished settling. I watched her face change as each fact landed. Is that really the kind of man you want? David loves me, she said, but her voice wavered. David loves money. He loves status. He loves whatever makes him feel important. I moved toward the door, then paused. But maybe you already know that. Maybe that's why you're here too. For the money. For the yacht and the houses and the lifestyle. That's not. There's nothing wrong with it, Candace. At least be honest about it. I opened the door. But here's something to think about. Money reveals who people really are. And Richard knew exactly who his son was. That's why he left me more than he left David. I walked out before she could respond, leaving her standing there with her mouth open. When I returned to the main room, David was watching me with suspicious eyes. He'd seen me talking to Candace. He was wondering what we'd said. Good. Let him wonder. Let him worry. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and champagne and watching David slowly unravel. By the time the gala ended at 11, Candace was barely speaking to him, and David looked like he wanted to murder someone. Simone and I shared a cab home, laughing like teenagers. Did you see his face? Simone kept saying. When Mr. Harrison made you stand up. I thought David was going to explode. Richard planned that, I said softly. He had to. He told Mr. Harrison to honor me. To show everyone that I mattered. You were always the one who mattered, Janet. David just made you forget it for a while. When I got home, I found a note on the kitchen counter in David's handwriting. We need to talk. Tomorrow. This ends now. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. He was right about one thing. This was ending. Just not the way he thought. I didn't sleep Saturday night. I lay in the guest room bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the gala. The look on David's face. The respect in people's eyes. The way Candace had faltered when I'd mentioned the money Richard left me. I'd almost told her everything. Almost said, he left me $22 million. But Richard's wisdom held me back. Don't show your cards until you have to. Build your foundation first. And that foundation was almost complete. Sunday morning, I woke up to angry footsteps outside my door. David didn't knock. He just barged in, still wearing his pajama pants and yesterday's rage. We need to talk. Now. I sat up calmly, pulling the blanket around me. About what? About last night. About you embarrassing me in front of the entire yacht club. About you poisoning Candace against me. I didn't poison anyone, David. I just told her the truth. The truth? He laughed bitterly. You told her dad left you more money than he left me. That's a lie, Janet. A desperate, pathetic lie. I looked at him steadily. Is it? Something flickered across his face. Doubt. Fear. But then his arrogance rushed back in like a flood. Dad left you an envelope with some letters. That's it. I got everything else. Attorney Hayes confirmed it. Attorney Hayes confirmed what he was legally required to confirm. Nothing more. David stared at me and I could see his mind working, trying to figure out if I was bluffing. Trying to calculate whether his father could have hidden money from him. Even if Dad left you something, it wouldn't be much. A few thousand. Maybe 10,000 if he was feeling generous. Maybe, I said calmly. Or maybe your father was smarter than you gave him credit for. David's face turned red. You're trying to manipulate me. Make me think you've got something you don't have. It's not going to work, Janet. I want you out of this house. I want you to sign those divorce papers. And I want you to stop spreading lies about Candace and me. I'll sign your papers, I said quietly, after my lawyer reviews them, which should be sometime next week. Your lawyer. David snorted. You can barely afford groceries and you hired a lawyer? I found a way. People help those who help themselves, David. Something your father tried to teach you. The mention of Richard made David flinch. Good. He should flinch. He should remember the man who'd raised him to be better than this. Whatever, David said, moving toward the door. Sign the papers or don't. I'm filing for divorce either way. And I'm getting full custody of Deshaun. My blood went cold. You're what? You heard me. Deshaun deserves better than a bitter, angry mother who can't afford to give him anything. He deserves to grow up in luxury. With me. You've barely seen him all week, I said, my voice shaking now. You sent him to Aunt Teresa's because you were too busy with your new life. Too busy with Candace. I've been dealing with the estate. Handling business. Important things. David crossed his arms. And once this divorce is final, I'll have plenty of time for Deshaun. I'll give him everything. Private schools. Summer camps. Everything you could never afford. He doesn't need things, David. He needs his father. The father he used to have. The one who played catch with him and read him bedtime stories and made him laugh. That father was broke. Desperate. Playing a role to keep his family together. David's voice was ice. This is who I really am, Janet. This is who I've always been. I just finally have the means to show it. He walked out, leaving me shaking with rage and fear. Deshaun. He was going after Deshaun. I grabbed my phone and called Sandra Chin. Voicemail. Of course it was Sunday morning. I left a message, he's threatening full custody. Please call me back. Then I called Simone. He said what? She exploded when I told her. That man has lost his damn mind. What do I do? What if he actually tries to take Deshaun from me? He won't. He can't. Janet, listen to me, you're the primary caregiver. You're the stable parent. You're the one Deshaun actually wants to be with. No judge in Maryland is going to give David custody just because he inherited some money. But what if? No what ifs. We're going to get through this. Sandra's going to destroy him in court. And tomorrow, when those divorce papers get filed, David is going to realize he's been playing checkers while you've been playing chess. I took a shaky breath. I'm scared, Simone. I'm scared of losing my son. You won't lose him. I promise you, Janet. You won't lose Deshaun. After we hung up, I sat there for a long moment trying to calm my racing heart. Then I did what I always did when I needed strength. I went to church. Pastor Elaine Freeman had led our congregation for 15 years. She was a tall, powerfully built black woman with silver streaks in her natural hair and eyes that could see straight into your soul. She'd married David and me. Baptized Deshaun. Spoke at Richard's funeral. And she was in her office when I knocked, like she'd been expecting me. Come in, child, she said warmly. Sit down. I collapsed into the chair across from her desk and started crying. Big, ugly sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken inside me. Pastor Freeman didn't say anything. She just came around the desk, pulled me into her arms and let me cry. When I finally stopped, she handed me a box of tissues and sat back down. Tell me, she said simply. So I told her everything. Not about the money that still felt like a secret I needed to protect, but about David's transformation. About Candace. About the threats regarding Deshaun. Pastor Freeman listened without judgment, her face grave. That boy, she said when I finished. That boy has lost his way. Richard knew it too. Came to see me about a month before he passed. My head snapped up. He did. Said David was changing. Getting bitter. Hungrier for things that don't satisfy. Pastor Freeman leaned forward. He asked me to look after you. Said you were going to need guidance. Support. He said, Elaine, Janet's about to face a storm. Help her remember who she is. Fresh tears started falling. I don't know who I am anymore. Yes, you do. You're Janet Parker. You're a nurse who saves lives. You're a mother who loves her son with everything she has. You're a daughter who honored her father-in-law until his last breath. You're a woman of faith, strength, and grace. Pastor Freeman's voice was fierce now. And you are not going to let a man who's forgotten his values steal your joy or your child. But what if he tries? What if the court? The court isn't just about money, child. It's about what's best for that little boy. And what's best is being with his mama who loves him. Not being with a father who's too busy playing rich to remember his son's favorite bedtime story. I wiped my eyes, feeling something steady returning to my center. What do I do, Pastor? How do I fight this? You pray. You prepare. And you trust that God sees everything. David thinks he's won because he got some money. But money doesn't make a man. Character makes a man. And right now, David's showing he has neither. We prayed together there in her small office, and for the first time since Richard's funeral, I felt peace. Real peace. Not the absence of trouble, but the presence of strength. When I left the church, Sandra Chin had called back. Don't panic, she said immediately. David can threaten all he wants. We have documentation of his affair, his abandonment of Deshaun, his reckless spending. We're filing our countersuit tomorrow with a request for full physical custody and limited visitation. He won't know what hit him. What if he really fights? Then we fight back. And Janet? We have resources he doesn't know about. When the time is right, we'll show the court that you're more than capable of providing for Deshaun. That you've always been the stable parent. That you always will be. After we hung up, I drove to Aunt Teresa's to pick up Deshaun. He ran to me like always, but this time I held him longer, breathed him in deeper, memorized the weight of him in my arms. You're squishing me, Mama? He giggled. Sorry, baby. I just missed you. On the way home, Deshaun chattered about his weekend with his cousins. And we played video games, and Aunt Teresa made her famous mac and cheese, and Uncle Ron taught me a card game, and he paused. Did you see Daddy last night? I did. Did you tell him I love him? I remembered my promise. I did, sweetie. And he loves you too. The lie tasted bitter, but I couldn't let Deshaun see the truth yet. Couldn't let him know that his father was choosing money and status over him. That evening, David came home late, reeking of alcohol and perfume that wasn't Candace's. Another woman? Or just another bar? He stumbled past the kitchen where I was helping Deshaun with homework and went straight to the master bedroom without a word. Deshaun looked up at me with those wise, sad eyes. Is Daddy okay? Daddy's going through some things, baby. But it's not your fault. None of this is your fault. I know. But his voice said he didn't really believe it. I tucked him in extra carefully that night, read him 3 chapters instead of 2, and told him 100 times that I loved him. After he fell asleep, I sat in the guest room and looked at my calendar. Tomorrow was Monday. Tomorrow, Sandra Chen would file our countersuit. Tomorrow, David would learn that I wasn't going quietly into the night. Tomorrow, everything would change. I thought about calling Simone, but it was late. Instead, I pulled out my phone and looked at photos of Richard. Him holding baby Deshaun. Him laughing at a family barbecue. Him dancing with me at our wedding anniversary party 5 years ago while David was too tired to dance. I hope I'm making you proud, I whispered to the photo. I hope I'm doing this right. And somewhere I swear I heard his voice. You are, sweetheart. You are. Monday morning broke clear and bright. I dropped Deshaun at school, hugged him an extra few seconds, and told him I'd see him this afternoon. Then I drove straight to Sandra Chen's office. She was waiting with Thomas Reed, the financial advisor Attorney Hayes had recommended. Thomas was a sharp-dressed black man in his mid-40s with careful eyes and a knowing smile. Mrs. Parker, he said, standing to shake my hand. I've reviewed your financial situation. We need to talk strategy. For the next 2 hours, we discussed everything. How to structure my assets to protect them in the divorce. How to document David's reckless spending. How to ensure Deshaun's future was secure regardless of what happened with David. The key, Thomas explained, is showing the court that you're financially stable and responsible. That you can provide for Deshaun without needing anything from David. When you reveal the full extent of your inheritance, it needs to be strategic. Not vengeful. When do we tell David? I asked. Sandra and Thomas exchanged a look. Not yet, Sandra said. First, we file the countersuit. We establish your case for custody based on David's behavior. Then, when he starts making noise about your inability to provide, we drop the bomb. He's going to lose his mind, I murmured. Good. Sandra's smile was sharp. Let him. Angry people make mistakes. And we'll be there to document every single one. At 10 o'clock, Sandra filed the countersuit. Within an hour, David's lawyer had received it. By 11, my phone was blowing up with calls from David. I didn't answer. Instead, I went to work. I'd scheduled a meeting with the hospital administration about the community health center position. It was time to start building my new life. The hospital CEO, a kind older woman named Dr. Patricia Reynolds, greeted me warmly in her office. Lorraine speaks very highly of you, she said. Says you're the best nurse she's ever trained. Lorraine's been a wonderful mentor. She also mentioned you might be going through some personal changes. A divorce. Dr. Reynolds' eyes were sympathetic. I want you to know that won't affect our offer. If anything, having a director who understands struggle, who knows what it's like to rebuild from difficulty, that's exactly what our community needs. We talked for an hour about the position, the vision, the impact it could have. By the time I left, I'd accepted the job. I'd start in 2 weeks, which gave me time to finish out my shifts and help train my replacement on the regular nursing floor. As I walked to my car, my phone rang. Not David this time, but a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Parker? This is Candace Mitchell. I stopped walking. Hello, Candace. We need to talk. About David. About everything. Her voice sounded different. Smaller. Can you meet me? Just for coffee? Every instinct told me to say no. This was probably a trap. David probably sent her to get information. But something in her voice made me pause. When and where? I asked. 20 minutes later, I sat across from Candace in a small cafe far from our neighborhood. She looked different in daylight without the makeup and expensive dress. Younger. More vulnerable. Thank you for coming, she said quietly, stirring her coffee without drinking it. I wasn't sure you would. Why did you call? Because I need to know the truth. Candace looked up and her eyes were red-rimmed. David told me you were crazy. That you were making things up to hurt him. That his father barely left you anything. But Saturday night. She trailed off. Saturday night you saw something different. I finished. Everyone respected you. People I've been trying to impress for months treated you like family. And Mr. Harrison, the club president, he barely acknowledged David. It was like. She struggled for words. It was like they saw through him. Like they knew. Knew what? That he's not really one of them. That money doesn't make you belong. Candace looked down. I'm not from money either. I grew up in West Baltimore. Single mother. 4 siblings. I got out by being pretty, by dating men who could give me the life I dreamed about. And David was your ticket? I thought he was. Rich inheritance. Connections. A future. She laughed bitterly. But he's not rich yet, is he? The estate hasn't even fully settled. And already he's spending like crazy. Already he's talking about loans against his inheritance. Already he's. She stopped. Already he's what? Already he's looking at other women. Candace's voice cracked. I saw him Saturday night after the gala. With some blonde woman from the club. They were laughing. Touching. And I realized he's going to do to me what he did to you. The second someone better comes along. I should have felt victorious. Vindicated. But instead I just felt sad. Why are you telling me this? Because you said something Saturday night that I can't stop thinking about. You said money reveals who people really are. And Richard knew who his son was. That's why he left you more. Candace looked at me directly. Did he? Did Richard leave you more money? This was the moment. I could lie, protect my secret a little longer. Or I could tell the truth and watch it spread like wildfire. I thought about what Richard would want. What would serve justice best? Yes, I said quietly. Richard left me more. Significantly more. Candace's eyes widened. How much more? Enough that I'll never need anything from David. Enough that I can provide for my son without anyone's help. Enough that David's threats are meaningless. Does he know? Not yet. But he will soon. Candace sat back processing. He's going to lose his mind. He's already paranoid. Already convinced you're plotting against him. I'm not plotting. I'm protecting myself and my son. That's not how he'll see it. Candace pulled out her phone. There's something you should know. David's been talking to his lawyer about ways to prove you're an unfit mother. Ways to get full custody. He's desperate, Janet. And desperate people do terrible things. My blood ran cold. What kind of terrible things? I don't know exactly. But I heard him on the phone last night. Talking about evidence. About proving you're unstable. About witnesses who could testify that you're neglectful. She slid her phone across the table. On the screen was a text message from David to her. Need you to say you saw Janet drunk around Deshawn. Will be worth your while. I stared at the message, feeling ice in my veins. He asked you to lie, I said flatly. He offered me $10,000 to lie. Candace met my eyes. I'm not going to do it. That's why I called you. Whatever David and I had, it's done. And I'm not going to help him hurt a little boy. Or his mother. Why the change of heart? Because my mama raised me better than this. Because I remember what it's like to be poor and scared and worried about losing your kid to social services. Candace's voice strengthened. And because Saturday night I saw what real class looks like. It's not money or clothes or yachts. It's the way you carried yourself. The way people actually respected you because you'd earned it. I didn't know what to say. I'm going to send you screenshots of everything David sent me, Candace continued. Every message about trying to discredit you. Every plan he's made. Consider it my apology. You don't owe me an apology. Yeah, I do. I helped break up your marriage. Even if David was already halfway gone, I helped push him the rest of the way. She stood up, dropping a 20 on the table. For what it's worth, Janet, I think you're going to be fine. Better than fine. And I think David just lost the best thing that ever happened to him. She walked out before I could respond. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screenshots she'd sent. Evidence. Protection. Ammunition. By the time I got home, it was 3 o'clock. Deshaun would be out of school soon. I needed to pick him up, make him dinner, help with homework, all the normal mom things that felt impossible right now. But when I pulled into the driveway, I saw something that made my heart stop. A police car. And David standing on the front porch with 2 officers. I jumped out of my car. What's going on? One of the officers, a young black woman with kind eyes, stepped forward. Mrs. Parker? I'm Officer Jenkins. Your husband called us. He's asking us to escort him inside to collect some items. Says you've been preventing him from accessing his property. That's not true. I haven't prevented anything. She's lying, David said coldly. She changed the locks. She's keeping me from my own house. I didn't change any locks, I said to Officer Jenkins. The house is unlocked. David's been coming and going all week. Officer Jenkins looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Parker, have you tried the door? David's face flushed. He walked to the front door and tried the handle. It opened. See, I said quietly. No changed locks. No prevention. He's been playing games. Officer Jenkins sighed. Mr. Parker, if you have access to the house, we can't help you. This is a civil matter, not a criminal one. You'll need to work this out with your lawyers. But David started. Sir, unless she's actually preventing you from entering, which she's clearly not, this isn't a police matter. Officer Jenkins turned to me. Ma'am, are you safe here? I'm fine, officer. Thank you. The officers left, and David turned on me with rage in his eyes. You think you're so smart, he hissed. You think you've got it all figured out. I think you wasted police resources on a lie, I said calmly. And I think that's going to look really good in court when we're fighting for custody. You're not getting custody. You're not getting anything. You're nothing, Janet. A nobody who happened to marry into money. Marry into money? I laughed and it felt good. David, I didn't marry into money. I married a broke graduate student. I supported us both while you found yourself. I raised your son while you chased failed business ventures. I loved your father when you were too proud to visit him. I earned everything I have. You have nothing. I have everything that matters. A son who loves me. A community that respects me. A new job that I earned on my own merits. And more money than you'll ever see. The last part slipped out before I could stop it. David froze. What did you say? I could have taken it back. Could have laughed it off as hyperbole. But I was done protecting his feelings. Done making myself smaller so he could feel bigger. You heard me. Richard left me more money than he left you. Significantly more. And there's nothing you can do about it. David's face went white. Then red. Then purple. You're lying, he whispered. Ask Attorney Hayes. Ask Thomas Reed. Ask anyone who actually knows what's in that envelope. I moved past him toward the house. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to pick up our son. The son you've barely seen all week because you've been too busy playing rich. I left him standing there, frozen in shock and rage. Inside I called Sandra Chin. I told him, I said, about the money. He knows. Good, Sandra said firmly. Let him stew on it. Let him realize he's been outplayed by the woman he thought he could discard. And Janet? Yes. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. Very interesting. Tuesday morning I woke up to silence. David hadn't come home. His car was gone from the driveway, and when I checked his closet, some of his clothes were missing. Good. Let him run. Let him hide. It wouldn't change what was coming. I got Deshaun ready for school, made him his favorite breakfast chocolate chip pancakes, and tried to act like everything was normal. But he was watching me with those 2 wise eyes. Mama, where's Daddy? I don't know, baby. But don't worry about it, okay? Daddy's just figuring some things out. Is he mad at us? The question broke my heart. No, sweetie. He's not mad at you. Never at you. Daddy's just confused right now. About what? How could I explain to an 8-year-old that his father had chosen money over family? That greed had poisoned someone who was supposed to love him unconditionally? About what's important, I said finally. But that's a grown-up problem. Not your problem. After I dropped Deshaun at school, my phone rang. Attorney Hayes. Mrs. Parker, we need to talk. David showed up at my office first thing this morning. He's demanding to see Richard's complete financial records. All of them. Can he do that? He can request them. But the money Richard gave you was a gift made years ago. It's not part of the estate David inherited. He has no legal claim to it. Attorney Hayes paused. However, he's threatening to challenge the entire will. Says Richard must have been incompetent when he made these decisions. Says he was influenced by you. Rage flooded through me. Richard was the sharpest man I ever knew. Even at the end. I know that. You know that. And we have medical records proving his competency. But David's desperate, Mrs. Parker. And desperate people file desperate lawsuits. Let him, I said coldly. Let him waste his inheritance on lawyers. Let him show the whole world who he really is. There's something else. David's hired a private investigator. Says he needs evidence of your unfitness as a mother. My blood ran cold. A private investigator? Don't panic. You haven't done anything wrong. There's nothing to find. But I wanted you to be aware that you're being watched. Be careful. Document everything. Keep records of every interaction with Deshawn, every activity, every doctor's appointment. After we hung up, I sat in my car outside Deshawn's school, shaking with fury and fear. David was going to war. Not just against me but against our son's stability. Against everything that mattered. I called Sandra Chin. Let him hire investigators, she said calmly. Let him waste his money. Meanwhile, we're building an airtight case. I've got Deshawn's teachers ready to testify about your involvement. I've got your supervisor at the hospital documenting your work ethic. I've got neighbors who've seen you with Deshawn every day while David was nowhere to be found. But what if he makes something up? What if he plants evidence? Then we sue him for defamation, for harassment, and for emotional abuse. Janet, you need to trust the process. Trust that truth wins. Trust that judges see through this kind of manipulation every single day. I wanted to believe her. But I'd seen what money could do. How it could buy lawyers and witnesses and reality itself. That afternoon, I picked up Deshawn from school and took him to the park. We needed normalcy. We needed to remember what joy felt like. While Deshawn played on the swings, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Nice playground. Deshawn looks happy. Would be a shame if something happened to change that. My hands started shaking. I looked around, scanning the park, trying to spot whoever was watching us. But I saw nothing. Just other parents, other kids, normal life. I screenshot the message and sent it immediately to Sandra Chin. Her response was instant. That's harassment. Possibly criminal intimidation. Forward to police. File report. Document everything. So I did. Officer Jenkins, the same officer from yesterday, took my statement with a grave face. Mrs. Parker, this is escalating. Has your husband ever been violent? No. Never. He's angry, but he's not. I never thought he'd. People change when money's involved. When custody's at stake. She handed me a card. This is the domestic violence hotline. And this is my direct number. If anything at all makes you feel unsafe, you call me immediately. That night, I kept Deshawn close. We made dinner together, watched his favorite movie, and I let him fall asleep in my bed. I couldn't bear to let him out of my sight. Around midnight, I heard a car in the driveway. David's car. I got up carefully, not wanting to wake Deshawn, and went downstairs. David was in the kitchen, drinking straight from a bottle of whiskey. You ruined everything, he said without looking at me. You and Dad. You plotted against me. We didn't plot anything, David. Richard saw who you were becoming and tried to protect me. Protect Deshawn. Protect you? David laughed bitterly. He gave you my inheritance. Money that was supposed to be mine. Money I deserved. You got $18 million. That's not enough. It's not about the amount. David slammed the bottle on the counter. It's about what it means. He chose you over me. His own son. He betrayed me. He loved you, David. Until the very end. But he knew. He knew nothing. He was a foolish old man who let you manipulate him. Who let you poison him against his own blood. That's not true and you know it. David stood up, swaying slightly. I'm going to prove you're unfit. I'm going to prove you manipulated Dad. I'm going to take Deshawn from you and make sure you never see another penny of that money. The money is mine, David. Legally. Permanently. There's nothing you can do about it. We'll see about that. He moved toward the stairs, then stopped. Where's my son? Sleeping. In my bed. Where he feels safe. In your bed? See. This is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. He's 8 years old. He should be sleeping in his own bed. He was scared. I comforted him. That's what mothers do. Or it's what manipulative women do to turn children against their fathers. David pulled out his phone. I'm documenting this. Adding it to the evidence. You do that. And while you're at it, explain to the judge why you've barely seen Deshawn in 2 weeks. Why you forgot to tell him you loved him. Why you've spent more time with investigators and lawyers than with your own son. David's face contorted with rage. For a moment I thought he might hit me. But then he just turned and walked upstairs to the master bedroom, slamming the door behind him. I stood in the kitchen, shaking until I heard his door close. Then I went back to the guest room and crawled in beside Deshaun. He shifted in his sleep, curling closer to me. "Love you, Mama," he murmured without waking. "Love you too, baby," I whispered. "More than anything in this world." Wednesday morning, everything came to a head. I woke up to find David gone again, truly gone this time. Most of his clothes were missing. His toiletries. His laptop. And on the kitchen counter, a note. "My lawyers will be in touch. Tell Deshaun I'll see him when this is over. When you're not poisoning him against me." Poisoning him? I'd done nothing but protect him, love him, try to shield him from the ugliness of his father's transformation. I called Sandra Chin immediately. "He's escalating because he's losing," she said. "Every move he makes just helps our case. The abandonment, the accusations, the harassment. It's all documented now. When do we go to court?" "Emergency custody hearing is scheduled for Friday. 2 days. Can you hold it together for 2 more days?" "I have to. For Deshaun." That afternoon, I went to the hospital for my last regular shift before transitioning to the community health center position. Lorraine found me in the break room eating lunch I couldn't taste. "You look exhausted," she said, sitting down beside me. "I feel exhausted." "Talk to me." So I told her everything. The threats. The investigators. The text at the playground. David's middle-of-the-night rage. Lorraine listened, her face growing more concerned. When I finished, she took both my hands in hers. "Listen to me, Janet. You are doing everything right. You're protecting your child. You're standing up for yourself. You're not letting that man break you." She squeezed my hands. "And in 2 days, a judge is going to see exactly what you've been dealing with. They're going to see a devoted mother and an absent father. And they're going to do what's right. You can't promise that." "No. But I can promise that you're stronger than you think. And that you've got an entire community behind you." She pulled out her phone. "I've been making some calls. People who know you. People who've seen you with Deshaun. People who want to testify on your behalf." She showed me a list. Deshaun's teachers. My co-workers. Our pastor. Our neighbors. Even Mr. Harrison from the yacht club. "They all offered?" I whispered. Without hesitation. "That's what happens when you live your life with integrity, Janet. People see it. People remember. And when you need them, they show up." I started crying right there in the break room. Tears of exhaustion, fear, and overwhelming gratitude. Thursday passed in a blur of preparation. Sandra Chin prepped me for court. Thomas Reed helped document my financial stability. Simone helped me choose what to wear. Pastor Freeman prayed with me. And through it all, I kept Deshaun close. We did homework together. Made dinner together. Read stories together. I memorized the sound of his laugh, the curve of his smile, the way he said, "Mama," like it was the safest word in the world. Because tomorrow, everything would be decided. Tomorrow, a judge would determine where Deshaun would live, who he'd be with, whether David's money and lawyers could overcome the simple truth, that I was his mother and I loved him more than life itself. That night, after Deshaun fell asleep, I sat in the dark guest room and pulled out Richard's letter. I'd read it 100 times, but I needed to read it once more. "You are strong, Janet. Stronger than you know. And you are loved." "I hope you're right, Richard," I whispered to the darkness. "I hope I'm strong enough for this." And somewhere, somehow, I felt his presence. Felt his love. Felt his certainty that everything would be okay. Because it had to be. It had to be. Friday morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the guest room window. I woke before my alarm, Deshaun still sleeping peacefully beside me. For a moment, I just watched him breathe, memorizing his face, praying that tonight he'd still be sleeping safely in this house. The courthouse was downtown, a grand building with marble columns and the weight of justice heavy in its stone walls. Sandra Chin met me on the steps, immaculate in a navy suit, confidence radiating from every pore. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." Inside, the hallway was crowded with people and I realized with shock that they were there for me. Lorraine Davis in her Sunday best. Pastor Freeman. Deshaun's second-grade teacher, Mrs. Andrews. Mr. Harrison from the yacht club in an expensive suit. Simone. Even Officer Jenkins there on her day off. What I started. "Character witnesses," Sandra said with satisfaction. "Every single one of them volunteered to testify on your behalf. To tell the judge who you really are. Across the hallway, David stood with his lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit, and Candace. Wait, Candace? She caught my eye and gave me a small nod. Then I understood. She wasn't there for David. She was there for me. The bailiff called us into the courtroom. Judge Maria Santos presided, a stern-looking Latina woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. This is an emergency custody hearing, she began. Mr. Parker has filed for full custody of the minor child, Deshaun Parker, age 8. Mrs. Parker has counterfiled for full physical custody with limited visitation. Let's begin. David's lawyer went first, painting a picture of me as unstable, manipulative, and financially incapable. He brought up the night Deshaun slept in my bed, inappropriate boundary crossing. He mentioned my emotional state after Richard's death. He claimed I was alienating Deshaun from his father. And Your Honor, he concluded, Mr. Parker has significant financial resources to provide for his son. Private schools, tutors, opportunities Mrs. Parker simply cannot afford. Judge Santos looked unimpressed. Money doesn't make a good parent, counselor. What evidence do you have of actual unfitness? David's lawyer faltered. Well, Your Honor, we have testimony. From whom? We had hoped Miss Mitchell would testify, but I'm here to testify for Mrs. Parker, Candace said clearly from the gallery. David asked me to lie. I refused. The courtroom went silent. Judge Santos's eyebrows rose. You're saying Mr. Parker attempted to suborn perjury? Yes, Your Honor. He offered me money to say I'd witnessed Mrs. Parker drinking around Deshaun. It wasn't true. I have the text messages. David's face went white. His lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. I'll need to see those messages, Judge Santos said grimly. Bailiff, please collect Miss Mitchell's phone. As Candace handed over her phone, Sandra Chin stood. Your Honor, may I present our witnesses? Please do. One by one they came forward. Deshaun's teacher testified about my involvement in school, my attendance at every parent-teacher conference, my volunteer work in the classroom. Lorraine Davis spoke about my dedication as a nurse, my compassion, my reliability. Pastor Freeman talked about my faith, my community service, my character. Mr. Harrison testified about Richard's love for me, his trust in my judgment, his explicit wishes that I be supported and protected. Richard Parker was one of the finest men I knew, Mr. Harrison said. And he told me repeatedly that Janet was the daughter of his heart. That she exemplified everything he valued: service, compassion, integrity. I've known the Parker family for 20 years. I've watched David grow up. And I can tell you with certainty that Richard would be heartbroken to see his son acting this way. Officer Jenkins testified about the threatening text message, about David's false police report, about the pattern of harassment she'd witnessed. And finally, Sandra Chin presented the evidence. Photos of the threatening text. Records of David's spending sprees while Deshaun was sent away. Documentation of his affair. Proof that he'd barely seen Deshaun in 2 weeks. Your Honor, Sandra said, this isn't about money. Mr. Parker thinks that because he inherited $18 million, he automatically deserves custody. But he's forgotten the most important thing. Being a parent isn't about what you can buy. It's about showing up. Being present. Putting your child first. And has Mrs. Parker put Deshaun first? Judge Santos asked. Every single day of his life. She's the one who takes him to school, helps with homework, attends doctor's appointments. She's the one who comforts him when he's scared. She's the one who loves him unconditionally, not because it looks good, not because it serves an agenda, but because he's her son. Judge Santos reviewed the documents in front of her for what felt like hours. Finally she looked up. Mr. Parker, she said, and David straightened. I've reviewed the evidence. I've heard the testimony. And I'm deeply troubled by what I've seen. David's lawyer started to speak, but Judge Santos held up a hand. You've spent the last 2 weeks more concerned with your inheritance than with your son. You've made false reports to police. You've attempted to suborn perjury. You've harassed your wife with threatening messages. You've abandoned your child to pursue. What? Status? A yacht club membership. David's face was red. Your Honor, I was grieving my father. As was your wife. As was your son. And yet Mrs. Parker still showed up for Deshaun every single day. She still maintained her responsibilities. She still put him first. Judge Santos leaned forward. Mr. Parker, money doesn't impress me. What impresses me is character. And you've shown a profound lack of it. She turned to me. Mrs. Parker, I'm granting you full physical custody of Deshaun. Mr. Parker will have supervised visitation every other weekend, pending completion of a parenting class and evaluation. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I almost collapsed. Furthermore, Judge Santos continued, I'm ordering Mr. Parker to pay child support according to state guidelines. And I'm warning you, Mr. Parker, if you continue to harass Mrs. Parker, if you make any more threats, if you attempt to manipulate this custody arrangement in any way, I will hold you in contempt. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, David mumbled. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down and suddenly I was surrounded by people. Simone was crying and hugging me. Pastor Freeman was praying. Lorraine was laughing. Sandra Chin was grinning like she just won the lottery. You did it, she said. You actually did it. Across the courtroom, David sat alone at his table. His lawyer had already left. Candace had left. Everyone had left him. He'd gotten exactly what he'd chosen. Money over family. Status over love. And now he had all the money in the world and no one to share it with. I felt a moment of pity. Just a moment. Then I remembered the threatening text. The custody threats. The way he'd looked at Deshawn like he was a possession to be won rather than a child to be loved. The pity evaporated. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Word had spread about the case, the wealthy heir, the wronged wife, the dramatic custody battle. Mrs. Parker. Is it true your father-in-law left you more money than his son? I stopped on the courthouse steps. Sandra Chin nodded at me. Go ahead. Richard Parker was one of the finest men I ever knew, I said clearly. He taught me that wealth isn't about money in a bank account. It's about the richness of your relationships, the depth of your compassion, the strength of your character. He left me many gifts, but the greatest was his example of how to live with integrity. What about your husband's claims that you manipulated his father? Richard Parker was sharp until his last day. No one could manipulate him. He made his choices with a clear mind and a loving heart. And those choices will be honored and protected. What's next for you? I smiled, thinking about the community health center, about Deshawn, about the future stretching bright and possible ahead of me. I'm going to pick up my son from school. I'm going to make him his favorite dinner. I'm going to start my new job. And I'm going to build a life that would make Richard proud. I looked directly at the cameras. That's what real wealth looks like. 3 months later, the community health center opened to lines around the block. We offered free clinics, health education, mental health services, everything West Baltimore needed and rarely got. On opening day, Deshawn cut the ribbon with giant ceremonial scissors, grinning from ear to ear. My mama made this happen, he told everyone who would listen. Simone was there, of course. And Lorraine. And Pastor Freeman. And Mr. Harrison, who donated a significant sum to the center in Richard's name. And Candace, surprisingly. She'd started over, gotten a job, her own apartment, was taking night classes. Thank you, she said quietly when she found me in the chaos. For showing me what real strength looks like. Thank you for choosing truth, I replied. David wasn't there. He'd mostly disappeared after the custody hearing, buried in his properties and yachts and empty luxury. Deshawn saw him every other weekend, supervised visits that were awkward and strained. But slowly, carefully, David was learning. Learning to actually be present. Learning to listen. Learning that being a father was about so much more than writing checks. Maybe he'd get there. Maybe not. But that wasn't my concern anymore. My concern was the woman crying in my office later that day, a young mother whose child needed care she couldn't afford. It's okay, I told her gently, pulling up her file. We'll figure it out. That's what we're here for. Because that's what Richard had taught me. That wealth is meant to be shared. That power is meant to lift others up. That love is measured in presence, not presence. That evening, I drove home with Deshawn chattering in the backseat about his day at school, his weekend plans, his dreams of being a doctor, just like Mama. Our house was smaller now. I'd sold the one I'd shared with David and bought a cozy Craftsman in a neighborhood full of families and laughter. The furniture wasn't expensive, but it was ours. The photos on the walls were real, not staged. It was home. After Deshawn was in bed, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea and pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app, something I still did sometimes just to remind myself it was real. $22,400,000. Plus growth. Plus interest. Plus investments that Thomas Reed had wisely managed. More money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. But the number didn't make me feel powerful. The community health center did. Deshawn's laughter did. The thank you notes from patients did. The knowledge that I was living exactly as Richard would have wanted did. My phone buzzed with a text from Simone. Wine night tomorrow? You, me, and celebrating how you destroyed David with pure grace? I laughed and texted back. Yes. But we're celebrating Deshawn's science project more than David's destruction. Fine. Both. Faced with tears of joy. As I sat there in the cooling evening watching fireflies dance in the yard, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal. The fear. The fight. The victory. And I thought about Richard's last words to me in that video. Be free. You've earned it. I was free. Free from David's contempt. Free from financial fear. Free from the belief that my worth was tied to someone else's opinion of me. I was Janet Parker. Nurse. Mother. Daughter in heart. Community leader. And I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The envelope Richard had left me hadn't just contained money. It had contained permission to value myself, to fight for myself, to believe I deserved more than the scraps someone threw me. The balance in that account had silenced David's arrogance. But more importantly, it had amplified my own voice. And I was never going to be silent again. 1 year later, the Community Health Center's first anniversary celebration filled the parking lot with music, laughter, and the smell of barbecue. Deshawn, now 9 and considerably taller, ran around with other kids while I manned the sign-up table for new patients. Mrs. Parker? A young woman approached hesitantly. I heard you help people. Even if they can't pay. That's right. That's what we're here for. As I took her information, I saw Simone across the lot, talking to a handsome man in a doctor's coat. She caught my eye and gave me a thumbs up. I laughed, shaking my head. Something's never changed. David had remarried a wealthy woman from the yacht club who actually did fit his new lifestyle. I'd met her once at Deshawn's school play. She was polite but distant. She didn't ask about me and I didn't volunteer information. Deshawn was doing well with the arrangement. He spent time with David and his stepmother, but he came home to me. Always to me. And he knew without me ever saying it who had fought for him. Who had chosen him. Who loved him unconditionally. Mama? Deshawn ran up, his friend Tyler in tow. Can Tyler sleep over tonight? Please? If it's okay with his parents. It is. His mom said yes if you said yes. Then yes. The boys ran off, whooping with joy, and I smiled. This was what victory looked like. Not revenge or retribution or watching David suffer. Just joy. Pure, simple, everyday joy. Mr. Harrison approached, moving slowly with his cane. Janet. Wonderful turnout. Thank you for everything you've done for the center, Mr. Harrison. It's what Richard would have wanted. He'd be so proud of you. He paused. I heard from David last week. He's trying to donate to the Yacht Club Scholarship Fund. Said it's what his father would have wanted. That's good. That's really good. He's trying, I think, to be better. To understand what his father was trying to teach him. I hope he gets there. For Deshawn's sake. Mr. Harrison squeezed my shoulder. You're a remarkable woman, Janet Parker. As the sun set on the celebration, as families packed up and headed home, as Deshawn and Tyler played one last game of tag, I stood in the parking lot of the community health center I'd built and felt complete peace. Richard's envelope had given me money. But his love had given me something far more valuable. The knowledge that I was enough. That I'd always been enough. That my worth wasn't determined by how much money I had or who I was married to or what anyone else thought of me. I was enough because I showed up. Because I loved deeply. Because I served faithfully. Because I chose to use my resources, all of them, to lift others up. That was the real balance. Not the one in my bank account. The balance between receiving and giving. Between being blessed and being a blessing. And in that balance, I'd found not just justice but joy.
On Christmas night, Angela's husband didn't come home. He was with another woman, but she didn't scream. She didn't chase. She lit the candles, served dinner for two, and ate alone. By midnight, the untouched plate across the table was colder than the silence. In the heart of Dallas, the mansion glittered with festive lights, but no one noticed her hands trembling as she wrote. Her words were calm, but each line carried a finality her voice never dared speak. Richard Campbell, a billionaire loved by the public, returned to a house still glowing, only to find the one person who truly saw him was gone. And on the oak desk beside the photo of their wedding night lay her letter. She didn't cry. She didn't explain. She simply gave him one impossible choice, because sometimes a quiet goodbye is the loudest revenge. What do you think she wrote, and what if that choice was between his legacy and her silence? Subscribe to see what the letter reveals, because the secret inside could ruin more than a marriage. Richard Campbell had everything. Dallas called him the man who built the skyline. From nothing, he carved an empire of steel and glass. Skyscrapers bore his name. Bankers and politicians shook his hand with respect. His suits were custom, his watch worth more than a family home. He was 45, billionaire, admired, envied. But inside his penthouse, silence followed him like a shadow. Success filled his calendar, not his soul. Richard often stood by the tall windows at night. The city glittered below, yet he felt strangely alone, as if the view belonged to someone else. He had money, he had fame. What he lacked was warmth. People whispered that he was untouchable, too powerful, too polished. No one saw the boy who once worked construction, who dreamed of more. No one touched the man behind the empire. Until one day, a woman walked into his boardroom, and with nothing more than her presence, she cracked the armor he had spent a lifetime building. Her name was Angela Campbell, a black woman with elegance, intelligence, and quiet strength. Before marriage, she had been a strategic marketing director, known for turning impossible campaigns into triumphs. She was sharp, confident, and yet deeply human. The first time Richard saw her, the room seemed to pause. Board members shuffled papers, screens flickered, but all his focus was on her. Angela's eyes carried both fire and warmth. Her voice had a rhythm that was calm, yet commanding. She wasn't just beautiful, she was magnetic. Every word she spoke felt measured, meaningful. She made complex data sound like a story everyone wanted to hear, and when her gaze met Richard's, something shifted. For a man who lived by numbers and contracts, this was different. It wasn't business. It was destiny disguised as a meeting. Richard leaned forward, listening more closely than he had in years. Angela wasn't trying to impress him. She didn't need to. Her presence did everything. In that moment, Richard realized that his empire, his wealth, even his fame, none of it mattered if he couldn't have her by his side. It happened in the most ordinary place, a cafe in the lobby of his building. Richard had been waiting, pretending to work, just to catch another glimpse of her. Angela arrived for her morning coffee, graceful as always. He stood too quickly, misjudging the distance. Their shoulders brushed, and in a blink, coffee spilled across his white shirt and navy tie. The rich scent filled the air, staining him in dark brown. Angela gasped, mortified. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry!" Her hands fluttered, reaching for napkins. But Richard, he laughed. Not the measured laugh he used in meetings, but a real, deep laugh he hadn't heard from himself in years. "Please," he said, dabbing at his shirt. "After you christen me with your coffee, I think you can call me Richard." Her worried frown softened into a smile. That smile carried warmth that no fortune could buy. From that moment, the accident became more than a mishap. It became a bridge. A coffee-stained tie turned into the first thread of a story neither of them expected. And years later, that very moment would be remembered as the symbol of how their love began. What started with spilled coffee soon grew into evenings filled with conversation. Richard found excuses to see her. Angela, careful yet curious, never pushed him away. Dinners stretched into hours. They talked about childhood dreams, about failures and triumphs. She told him about growing up in South Carolina, the books her father read to her, the dances her mother taught. He shared stories of his humble beginnings, a carpenter's son who once swung a hammer before he held billion-dollar contracts. For Richard, Angela was more than company. She was renewal. Around her, he laughed more, breathed deeper, felt younger. His empire no longer seemed like enough. He wanted more. He wanted a life with her. Angela listened with her whole being. Her laugh was soft but rich. Her silence was never empty. It was filled with attention. She had a way of seeing through the layers of his polished life, down to the man he rarely let anyone know. Each night, Richard dreaded the goodbye at her door. Each morning he looked for her smile. Without even noticing, they were falling. Not into wealth, not into fame, but into the kind of love that changes everything. Christmas Eve arrived, crisp and clear. Dallas glittered with lights, but Richard wanted a moment that belonged only to them. He led Angela to the rooftop of his newest tower. The city spread beneath them, alive with color. Then, with a single gesture, he pointed toward the skyline. Across the glass wall of his first building, thousands of lights formed two simple words: "Marry me." Angela gasped. Snow began to fall. Rare in Texas, rare enough to feel like heaven itself had arranged it. Her eyes shimmered with tears. Richard knelt, holding a ring that seemed to capture both starlight and memory. "Angela, Rose," he whispered. "I built an empire of steel, but none of it matters without you. Be my wife. Build the rest of life with me." She covered her mouth, breathless. The city noise faded. Only the snow, the lights, and the man she loved remained. "Yes," she whispered, voice shaking but sure. "Yes, Richard. 1,000 times, yes." He slipped the ring onto her hand, and together they stood in falling snow. Dallas had never seen such a night. It was wealth, power, and glory. But more than that, it was love shining brighter than any light below. Spring came, and with it, a wedding that Dallas society would never forget. The Campbell name already commanded respect. The ceremony sealed it in legend. At the botanical garden, flowers bloomed in perfect harmony. Orchids from Angela's South Carolina roots mixed with roses that symbolized Richard's empire. It was not just a union of two people. It was the blending of cultures, families, and worlds. Angela walked down the aisle in a gown that glowed in the sun. Richard's breath caught. Skyscrapers could not compare to the beauty before him. Guests whispered, a perfect couple, power and grace. Their vows were simple, yet heavy with meaning. Richard promised to build more than towers. He vowed to build a home with her at its center. Angela promised to stand beside him in every storm. Applause thundered when they sealed their vows with a kiss. Cameras flashed. Business leaders, politicians, and socialites clapped, but none of that mattered. For Angela, the moment was not about fame. It was about the way Richard looked at her, as if she was the only person in the world. They danced beneath the evening stars. Money and prestige surrounded them, but what held them together was far richer: love. The Swiss Alps welcomed them with snow-capped peaks and crisp mountain air. Richard had arranged the honeymoon as a surprise. Private helicopters, a suite that overlooked valleys painted in white, orchids from Angela's childhood home waiting in the room. For weeks they skied by day and dreamed by night. They laughed when Angela, seeing snow for the first time, tried and fell, only for Richard to catch her. They explored hidden villages, shared hot chocolate by firelight, and walked hand in hand beneath stars. One evening, as the sun melted behind the mountains, Angela whispered, "How did we get here? A year ago, I was leading meetings. Now, I'm standing at the top of the world with you." Richard took her hand, pressing it to his chest. "Whatever you dream," he said, "I'll build it. If you want a house filled with warmth, I'll make it. If you want a legacy, I'll shape it. I'll build not just towers, but a future for us." She smiled, tears threatening to fall. "Then promise me," she said. "Promise me we'll always make time for love, even when the world calls your name." "I promise," Richard replied, his voice steady as the mountains around them. Back in Dallas, their life settled into rhythm. The penthouse that once felt cold now glowed with warmth. Angela filled it with touches of home, colors, books, and laughter. On quiet nights they planned. Richard spoke of new projects, towers that would reshape the city. Angela listened, then added dreams of her own. "One day," she said softly, "I want to hear small feet running through these halls. I want this home to echo with children's laughter." Richard's heart swelled. He had chased wealth and status for so long. But this was the dream he wanted most. "Then we will," he promised. "We'll build that life together." They hosted dinner parties, blending cultures and flavors. Friends admired them, calling them the couple who had it all. But when the guests left, Richard and Angela remained simply husband and wife, laughing together, holding each other close. Every Sunday, they walked through the arts district, hand in hand, as though they were just another couple in love. Angela's vision of family became the guiding star in their conversations. Richard imagined children with her eyes, her smile, her strength. The empire outside their doors was vast, but their truest empire was the one they dreamed within their home. Their first anniversary approached with joy. Richard planned it perfectly: a private dinner, flowers, gifts. Angela woke that morning smiling, but beneath the smile was a tremor. She had felt small waves of weakness in recent weeks, dizziness when standing, tiredness that clung like shadow. She brushed it off as stress. The day was magical. A helicopter tour of Dallas, a necklace to match her wedding ring, laughter that carried them back to the start. But as night fell, the weakness returned stronger. At dinner, candlelight flickered across Angela's face. Richard raised his glass in a toast, words of devotion on his lips. Angela reached for her water, but her hand shook. The glass slipped slightly. She tried to smile, but the room tilted. "I just need some air," she whispered, standing. Then her legs gave way. Richard caught her before she hit the floor. Fear gripped him. $1 billion projects had never shaken him, but this moment did. "I'm taking you to the hospital," he said, his voice fierce, no room for debate. Angela wanted to protest, but the darkness pressed in. The perfect anniversary turned into flashing lights, hospital corridors, and uncertainty. It was the night their love story first collided with fragility, and the shadow refused to leave. The hospital room was bright, but the words spoken inside carried shadows. Dr. Bennett sat across from Richard and Angela, his tone careful. "It's a rare autoimmune disorder," he explained. "Her immune system is attacking her nerves, weakening her muscles. The good news, it's early. The hard truth, treatment will be long, uncertain, and painful." Angela squeezed Richard's hand, trying to be calm, but Richard's world tilted. He had defeated every challenge with money, power, and determination. Yet here, none of it mattered. "How much?" he asked automatically, clinging to the one tool he knew. The doctor shook his head. "This isn't about money. It's about time, patience, and strength." Richard looked at his wife, her face pale, her smile fragile yet brave. A storm of emotions rose inside him: fear, anger, helplessness. For the first time in his life, he felt powerless. That night, as Angela drifted into restless sleep, Richard sat by her bed, his hand holding hers tightly. He whispered to himself, "What's the use of billions if I can't protect her? What's the worth of empires if I lose her?" The empire outside the hospital windows glittered. But inside, Richard realized the only treasure worth saving was lying in the bed beside him. Days turned into weeks. Angela's hospital room became their home. Machines beeped softly. Nurses moved in and out. Life outside seemed far away. Angela bore the treatments with grace. IV drips, endless tests, fatigue so deep she could barely lift her head. Yet, when Richard entered, she smiled. "You're here," she whispered, as if that alone gave her strength. Richard tried to manage his business from the corner of her room. Contracts, meetings, calls, it all waited. But his focus was fixed on her. One night, she urged, "You don't have to stay every minute. The company needs you." Richard set the papers aside and leaned close. "Listen to me. You are my business now. You are my empire. Everything else can wait." And tears welled in Angela's eyes, not from weakness, but from love. She knew what it cost him, walking away from power, from prestige. Yet his vow was stronger than ambition. Together, they faced each day. When she cried from the pain of therapy, he held her hand. When she laughed at small victories, he laughed too. The penthouse of Dallas still bore his name, but Richard Campbell's heart had moved into this room. His wealth had built towers. His love was building something greater: endurance. Physical therapy began. It was brutal. Angela's body trembled with each effort. Muscles that once moved with grace now fought against her. Sweat mixed with tears. "Again," the therapist urged gently. Angela bit her lip, pushing through. Her legs wobbled. She fell. Richard rushed forward, but Angela shook her head. "Let me try again," she whispered. Richard's chest ached as he watched her fight. This was not the woman who once commanded boardrooms with effortless power. This was a warrior, fragile yet unbroken. He stayed beside her, handing her water, steadying her arms, whispering encouragement. When the sessions ended, Angela collapsed into bed, exhausted. Some nights she cried into his chest. "I hate this," she confessed. "I hate being weak." Richard stroked her hair. "You're not weak. You're stronger than anyone I know, stronger than me." He had won contracts worth billions. He had built skyscrapers against the sky. Yet none of it compared to the sight of his wife, refusing to quit, fighting for the right to live. Pain became part of their routine. But so did love. Angela's struggle and Richard's unwavering presence turned suffering into something else, a bond. Tested by fire, stronger than steel. One morning, Richard woke to silence. Angela's side of the bed was empty. Panic gripped him until he heard soft music on the balcony. He stepped out, and there she was. Angela stood carefully, holding onto the railing, moving through her therapy exercises alone. Her hands trembled, her legs shook, but she was standing. "Angela," Richard whispered, his throat tight. She turned, her face glowing with triumph. "I wanted to see if I could do it without help," she said, breathless but proud. He rushed forward, ready to steady her, but she lifted a hand. "Not yet. Let me finish." Richard stood close, tears burning his eyes as he watched her complete each movement. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was victory. When she finally leaned into his arms, he whispered, I've built towers that touch the clouds, but this, seeing you stand, is the greatest thing I've ever witnessed." Angela smiled, her forehead against his chest. "Then remember this moment, because we're not done yet. I still have more mountains to climb." Hope flickered, fragile but real. For the first time in months, Richard allowed himself to believe that the shadow might one day lift. They returned home. The penthouse no longer glittered as a symbol of power, it became a place of healing. One room was transformed into a therapy space. Support bars lined the bathroom. Equipment filled corners once reserved for art. Yet Richard refused to let it feel like a hospital. Flowers brightened every room. Angela's favorite books lined the shelves. Music drifted softly in the background. Their days followed a new rhythm. Morning exercises, afternoon rest. Evenings spent together at the dinner table, sometimes with friends, sometimes alone, always with love. Richard cooked more than he ever had before. Angela teased him, laughing when he burned toast. That laughter, light and warm, became his new measure of success. One night, over simple pasta, Angela said softly, "This isn't the life we planned, but it's still ours, and I wouldn't trade it." Richard reached across the table, taking her hand. "Neither would I, because plans can fail, towers can fall, but us? We're unshakable." The city lights outside their windows still glittered with money and power, but inside, Richard and Angela built something richer, a daily life of healing, of love, of choosing each other again and again. It wasn't the dream they had imagined, but it was real, and it was theirs. Life seemed calmer. Angela was gaining strength. Their dinners were warm, their evenings tender, but business never waited. That was when Gretchen Thomas entered Richard's world. She was young, brilliant, and the new project manager for the Houston development. With deadlines pressing, Richard spent more hours on calls, more nights bent over blueprints. Angela first heard her name in passing. "Gretchen has a clever solution. Gretchen thinks we should try this." At first, Angela smiled. Work was Richard's nature. He thrived on ambition. But slowly, Gretchen's presence grew larger. Meetings stretched late, texts buzzed at midnight. Richard's eyes lit up when he spoke about the Houston project, about Gretchen's bold ideas. Angela tried to be understanding. She remembered how passion for work had once drawn her to him, but now it felt different. His mind seemed far away, his body present but restless. The penthouse felt colder, even with the lights twinkling outside. Angela watched him from across the dinner table, his phone face down yet glowing with notifications. For the first time, she felt something that scared her more than illness. Distance. It began with whispers. The soft buzz of Richard's phone after midnight. The way he excused himself to the balcony, speaking low, his back to her. Angela lay awake, listening. Her heart thudded with unease. She wanted to trust him, but every vibration of that phone planted doubt deeper. The next morning, she noticed, he said Gretchen too easily, too often. At breakfast, at lunch, during a casual conversation. Her name had become part of their life, uninvited. Angela tried to brush it aside. "It's just work," she told herself. But work had always been Richard's second love, never his first. Now it felt like she was the one pushed aside. One evening, she looked across the table. He smiled at her, but his eyes drifted toward the phone. A message blinked. His smile faltered. Angela's spoon paused. The soup grew cold. Silence filled the room. Inside, fear and sadness wrestled. She had fought through sickness, through weakness. But how do you fight a ghost? A name that slips into your marriage, unseen yet felt. The signs were too clear. Something was changing, and Angela's heart knew it before her mind admitted it. Christmas Eve arrived. The city glowed with lights, streets filled with carols. Families gathered close, but in their penthouse the air was heavy. Angela set the table. 2 plates, candles lit, a tree sparkling with ornaments from their love story. The little coffee cup that once symbolized their beginning hung at the center. She waited. 7 o'clock, 8, 9. Her phone buzzed, a message from Richard. "Meeting, running late, don't wait up." Her heart sank. She knew where he was, not in a boardroom, not at the office, but with Gretchen. Angela sat down at the table. The chair across from her remained empty. She poured wine, but her hands trembled. The sound of Christmas bells from the street below only deepened the silence inside. Tears did not come. Anger did not rise. Instead, a strange calm spread through her. She looked at the glowing tree, the reflection of herself alone in the glass windows. For the first time, she saw the truth. Love had once filled this room. Tonight, it was gone. Angela rose from the table. Her steps were steady. No shouting, no broken plates, no storm, only quiet. She walked to her desk and pulled out paper. Her pen moved slowly, carefully. Each word carried weight. Her heart broke with every line, but her hand did not tremble. Then she opened the closet. She lifted down her valise. The sound of the zipper seemed louder than any argument. She folded clothes neatly. A coat, a scarf, the pendant from her mother. She placed them inside with care. Every movement was calm, almost graceful. She had given her tears to sickness. She would not give them to betrayal. Angela paused at the doorway of their bedroom. His suit jacket hung over a chair, his tie draped carelessly. She touched the fabric once, then let it fall. In silence, she prepared her exit. It was not drama. It was dignity. On the desk, beside the glowing lamp, lay the letter. Angela read it once more before sealing it. My dearest Richard, by the time you read this, I will be gone. Do not blame yourself. Do not blame her. This is not about betrayal. It is about freedom. I free you to find happiness, without guilt, without burden. I know what my illness has cost us. I see how you shine when you speak of her. I cannot be the reason your light dims. Remember me as I was, standing strong, laughing in the snow, dancing with you beneath the lights. Not as I am now, fragile and tired. You built towers that touch the sky, but I cannot be the weight that keeps you on the ground. Please do not fight me on this. My only gift left is to give you back your freedom. I loved you then. I love you now, but I love you enough to let you go. Angela folded the paper, slid it into an envelope, and placed it where he could not miss it. She closed the suitcase, took one last look at the Christmas tree. Then, with quiet steps, she walked out into the night. The Christmas party was alive. Crystal glasses clinked. Laughter floated through the penthouse. Carols played softly in the background, but Richard felt restless. He searched for Angela among the guests. No sign of her emerald dress. He slipped away from the crowd, walked down the hall to their bedroom. The bed was untouched. The silence was sharp. On her desk, beneath the lamp, lay an envelope with his name. Richard picked it up. His chest tightened before he even opened it. The words blurred as he read. Line by line, her voice spoke through the page. Calm. Final. By the time he reached the end, his hands shook. The room spun. He staggered back, clutching the letter like a wound. Outside, the party sparkled. Inside, his world collapsed. Richard Campbell, billionaire, builder of towers, master of deals, stood frozen in a storm of poinsettias and gold lights. And for the first time in decades, he felt powerless. Richard sat alone, the letter crumpled in his hand. Music and laughter leaked from the party, but he heard none of it. Her words echoed. I free you to find happiness. I cannot be your burden. He thought of the empire he had built, the skyline shaped by his ambition, the contracts signed, the fortunes made. None of it mattered now. Money could not bring her back. Power could not rewrite her letter. Gretchen's brilliance meant nothing compared to Angela's quiet strength. He pictured Angela's smile, her eyes when she first walked into the boardroom, the way she lit up their home even in sickness. He had chased wealth, chased deadlines, and lost the one thing worth more than all of it. A hollow ache spread through him. For the first time he understood the true emptiness of riches. His fortune could buy anything, except the woman who had given him everything. Regret pressed heavy on his chest, and he knew, if he did nothing, she would be gone forever. At dawn, Richard moved like a man possessed. The party had ended, the guests gone, but his mission had just begun. He called every airline, demanding flight records. He hired private investigators, sparing no cost. He dialed her number again and again, each call going to voicemail. His messages grew desperate. Angela, please, come home. We can fix this. I love you. Only you. The penthouse felt haunted. Her coffee cup still sat by the sink. Her scarf hung by the door. Every trace of her screamed absence. He refused to rest. Days blurred into nights. Each lead felt thin, each silence unbearable. For once, his billions gave him no advantage. Finding her was not about money, it was about will, and his will was breaking. Richard Campbell, once untouchable, was now a man chasing shadows, fueled only by love and regret. While searching through her vanity, Richard found it. A leather-bound book, edges worn, pages filled with Angela's handwriting. He opened it with trembling hands. Her voice spilled out in ink. Another late meeting with Gretchen. Richard came home smiling, full of her ideas. I tried to be happy, but I saw myself in the mirror, pale, thin. My hands shook. No wonder he prefers her company. Page after page cut deeper. I want to be his partner, not his patient. I feel him slipping away. Tears blurred the words. Richard pressed the book to his chest as if holding her heart. He had been blind. She had suffered quietly beside him, writing her pain in pages while he was busy with deadlines. The journal ended with hope, then resignation. If I love him, I must let him go. Richard wept. For the first time in years, he wept without restraint, and in his tears he knew he had to find her, not for redemption, but because life without her was no life at all. The trail finally pointed south. Charleston, South Carolina. Angela's childhood home. Richard boarded his jet, driven by hope and fear. As the city came into view, memories of her stories returned. Church bells, oak trees draped in Spanish moss, the scent of salt in the air. Angela had returned to her roots, to the place where she first learned strength, community, and faith. In Charleston, she stayed near a small church surrounded by women who prayed with her, neighbors who welcomed her. Here, she wasn't the wife of a billionaire, she was simply Angela again. She found peace in quiet mornings, attending services, walking beneath the old magnolias. Slowly, her body healed. More importantly, her spirit found rest. But every night, when the bells tolled, her thoughts drifted back to Dallas, to Richard, to the love that had broken her heart and built her at the same time. Richard landed in Charleston knowing this was his chance. He could not buy forgiveness. He could only ask for it. The journey was far from over, but for the first time since Christmas, he felt a spark of hope. The church bells rang softly that Sunday morning. Richard stood outside, hands trembling, heart pounding harder than any boardroom battle. Through the open doors, he saw her, Angela. Dressed in a simple white dress, her head bowed in prayer. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, wrapping her in quiet light. For a moment, he froze. The billionaire who had conquered cities suddenly felt like a child, afraid, unworthy. Angela looked up. Their eyes met across the pews. Silence fell heavy between them, thicker than words. Her face was calm, but her eyes brimmed with questions. He stepped closer. Each footfall echoed in the hollow space. When he finally stood before her, Richard could barely breathe. Her lips parted, but no words came. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. Angela. Just her name, nothing more. And yet it carried everything. Richard's voice trembled. Money, fame, empire, none of it means anything without you. Angela's eyes filled with tears, but her words were steady. I am not the same woman you married. My body is weaker. My spirit carries scars. He reached for her hands, holding them gently as if they might break. Then let me be a better man, not to fix you, not to own you, but to walk with you, wherever you are, however you are. Angela's breath caught. She had waited for this, not riches, not promises, but humility. Her tears slipped free. Do you really mean that? Richard pressed her hands to his chest. Every word. Without you, this heart is just noise. With you, it beats with purpose. Silence lingered. Then Angela whispered, Maybe we can begin again. Richard stayed in Charleston. No boardrooms, no towers, just oak trees, ocean air, and slow mornings beside Angela. He learned to walk her pace. He carried groceries. He joined her at community prayers. He listened more than he spoke. For the first time, he lived without rushing. Angela grew stronger, not only in body, but in spirit. His presence steadied her. His humility softened her pain. Together, they rebuilt a rhythm. Quiet breakfasts, afternoon walks under Spanish moss, evenings filled with gentle laughter. Richard discovered that power wasn't measured in dollars, but in patience. Love wasn't proven in gifts, but in showing up. Angela discovered that she wasn't alone in her fight. She could lean without shame. Together, they were learning that healing wasn't about erasing scars. It was about carrying them side by side. One evening, Richard reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small ornament, wrapped in tissue. Angela frowned, then gasped when she saw it. The tiny coffee cup ornament. The same one from years ago, when love began with spilled coffee and laughter. He held it out, his voice breaking. Our love started here, messy, imperfect, but real. It can start again, if you'll let it. Angela pressed a hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. That little ornament carried every memory. The rooftop proposal, the vows, the sickness, the distance, the pain, and now the choice. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. When her fingers closed over his, she whispered through sobs, "Yes, yes, we can." Richard pulled her into his arms. For the first time in years, her tears were not of sorrow, but release. Angela chose dignity. Richard chose repentance. Together, they chose love again. True love is not about perfection. It is about choosing each other again and again. In Charleston, the bells rang as they walked hand in hand, no longer billionaire and wife, but simply man and woman. Their story was not flawless. It was scarred, fragile, tested by betrayal and illness. Yet those very trials became the soil where love grew deeper. Money fades, fame shifts, even health can falter. But love, the choice to stay, to forgive, to rebuild, that is the greatest wealth of all. That Christmas, the tiny coffee cup ornament hung once more on their tree. A reminder that even broken beginnings can grow into second chances. It stood for everything they had lost and everything they had chosen to save. If this story touched you, share it with someone who still believes in love, and subscribe for more stories that remind us dignity, hope, and love are always worth fighting for. Because in the end, it is not the towers we build or the fortunes we chase that define us. It is the courage to forgive, the strength to choose love, and the grace to hold on, even when everything else falls away.